So the first thing I wanted to do, obviously, is introduce myself. I know I kind of already did that on the email and everything, but just for the podcast purpose. So I'm Albert Goxman. I'm the founder of AG Supercars, and AG Supercars is actually a subsidiary of Flatout Investments. That's the main umbrella company. And I have Paul Gerrard. I'm saying correctly, right?
Well, close. It's Paul Gerrard.
Oh, Gerrard. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Who formerly was the STIG for 8 years, correct, Paul?
Yeah.
On Top Gear. So, I mean, the more badass than that, I don't think I could have a more badass guest than that. Except for maybe the crew of Top Gear, and even those guys were, I wouldn't consider them, I mean, as obviously not even close to as good as race car drivers you are. So it's an honor.
They're all good guys, and for sure happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. So let's get down to talking about cars, man. So Paul, the first thing that me and you kind of went back and forth with was obviously the most legendary, most insane, radical, badass. I think that would pretty much sum it down. The 917, the Porsche 917.
Yeah.
We were talking about that car, and that's kind of how me and you got in contact with each other. So the whole main thing was that, this is kind of the backstory to the car. I met a gentleman who's got a pretty awesome, he kind of does what I do. I tries to really stick with the rarest hypercars, supercars, and vintage race cars. And we kind of got talking together because we were trying to sell a different car. We were talking about a Ferrari 333 SP that was actually available here in Florida. And in that conversation, all of a sudden, the craziest thing happened. He says, "Hey, by the way, do you want to see something really crazy?" I said, "Yeah, sure. Show me what you got." And he brings me into his warehouse, and he showed me a bunch of awesome cars. He had a brand new GT3 RS there. This is when they first came out. And he had a couple of vintage Porsches, like a 930 and 930 Turbo. He had an old Alfa. It was I want to say it was, I always forget the model of Alfa. It was a super square body Alfa Romero that was pretty much considered a piece of shit, but it was a cool looking car.
Like a Milano or something.
I think it was a Murano. Yeah, it was something like that. It was a cool looking car.
Yeah. Like the cookie.
Exactly. Yes. And so then all of a sudden, I say, "Hey, listen, I have some pretty awesome, I have some pretty amazing buyers on my end. Do you have anything special?" He says, "You know what? I got just the thing." So he presents me the car that we're talking about right now, the Porsche 917, an original 1960. It was a 69 car, and it was a car that won Le Mans in 1970. So that was just, I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. I was like, holy shit, you have access to this car? He says, yeah. And I said, all right, well, what's the price tag on this thing? He says, well, technically, quote unquote, this car is not for sale, but everything has its price. And if I can give you that price, it would be around, he told me 25 to 26 million would probably purchase the car.
Yeah, that's about what I've heard them going for these days, is in the like 22, I think one sold for fairly recently.
Steve McQueen's, I believe it was Steve McQueen's 917 that was crashed several times on the racetrack. That car, I believe, went for around 22. I think it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if I'm mistaken. Yeah. So that was a pretty interesting thing. So I said, well, this is amazing. I mean, this is just levels of craziness that I can't even comprehend. So I went to work on it. I started trying to find a buyer for the car, and as you know, these things are, I mean, it's still a 1969 race car. So it wasn't the easiest thing to even try to comprehend on how am I even going to locate a buyer for this thing. But I did my best, and I was able to talk to two people that were potentials. Very, they had actually had several ridiculous Porsche, vintage race cars, and they were pretty crazy about Can-Am as well, just as I am. So that's why I reached out to them, and one of them gave me a pretty valid offer. Unfortunately, it wasn't to the exact amount that the owner was trying to get out of it. So we got pretty close. He said he would be willing to, if I gave him enough proof, that I really had access to this car. or I'll give you a valid offer. And I said, okay, great. So he ended up coming in a little bit shy at 23 million. I said, okay, well, all I can do is give it to the owner and see if he accepts it. And unfortunately, he ended up saying, listen, I tell your potential that I very much appreciate it, but unfortunately, this is a very special car. I don't have to tell anybody. He knows that as well, the potential buyer, and he knew that it was just one of those things where this is what he was limited to. So we ended up not being able to make the sale. But what was great about it was that I, now had access to the car, and anybody that would ever be interested in it, I could bring to the table. So let's talk about a little bit, Paul. I want to hear your end of the history of the 917. Obviously, what was obviously the thing that grabbed your attention about the car in the first place?
Well, for sure, that car to me means a lot. It's to say it's iconic. That's a word that's very much overused these days.
Correct.
But the 917 definitely deserves that, probably almost more than any other race car, because it really did establish Porsche to be the brand that it is today. And they kind of came from these humble origins, kind of initially building 4-cylinder cars with the Spider, and then kind of working their way up from that. And of course, the family ties go well back in the Piat family and Porsche family were designers for Auto Union, back in the pre-war stuff. So but Porsche as a brand, was kind of this little, offshoot, as it were, initially from Volkswagen, using basically a Volkswagen sourced engine initially, and then Metzger kind of got his mitts on it, the again iconic engine engineer and designer, and designed first a quad cam 4-cylinder, then a flat 6-cylinder, and then they started getting serious, right? And they went from sort of the 904 to the 906 to the 908 to the 910, and then finally Metzger got this edict that they wanted to win Le Mans overall.
Right.
And so then he designed the flat 12.
Right.
And of course, using a lot of the same, scalability of these boxer engines that he'd been designing all along. But he just built this just monster of an engine, and it had to do, the reason he could do it, I believe the FIA rules for that year were, if you wanted to build a pure race car like Ferrari was doing, you were limited to 3 liters. But if you wanted to build 25 of them, you could build a 5-liter engine. And so that's where Porsche went with the 917, is like, we'll build 25, and nobody had done that ever. Not Ferrari, not Maserati, not anyone, Jag, all the people that are sort of all the icons at Le Mans had never built that many of a car. So that's why this kind of weird rule even existed, and no one had ever taken advantage of it. And Porsche said, you know what, we'll build 25 of them. That'll get us an extra 2 liters of displacement, and we're going to build this crazy car. And so then, bam, you got the 917. And of course, you have to kind of see the Steve McQueen movie Le Mans. If you're listening to this and you don't understand the significance of this car, it basically put Porsche on the map. And Porsche was doing great as a manufacturer. And I even, I'm not going to say I'm close personal friends with, but I was teammates with Derek Bell. I'm friends with Derek Bell, and also I'm good friends with Vic Elford. And then you've got Brian Redmond, Joe Siffert, Rodriguez. You got all these folks that raced 917s back in the day, and also came up through the ranks with the 904, 906, 908, 910s.
Right.
And the 917s. And of course, they were racing like at Targa Florio. They were doing all sorts of racing. They were racing the sports car championship, but they were racing in the lesser categories because they had smaller displacement engines. So the 917s put them at Le Mans in the top class, running head to head against Ferrari, and building this 5-liter engine. And Ferrari eventually had to follow, and they did the 512, which also was a 5-liter engine, but it was sort of Porsche's idea to go do this, to take advantage of this kind of gap in the rules that allowed them to build the bigger engine. And this 5-liter flat V12 was just this monster. Yeah. And the chassis, if you've ever seen the chassis on a 917, it's built out of these little teeny tiny tubes. that make a Maserati birdcage look like it's overbuilt. And so when you sit in a 917 and you're looking around at the structure of the car, I'm a little guy. I'm 5'7". I'm like considered to be kind of big for a race car driver.
Right.
And I just barely tuck into that 917.
Right.
And then you're looking around at the structure of the vehicle around you because you can see all of it. It's before carbon fiber. So we're talking about fiberglass body panels or, hand beaten aluminum bits and pieces. Correct. And then this tubular, structure for the chassis. And the thing is, like, it's so small. I think if you've only ever seen the cars in person, you haven't seen them in person, you've only ever seen the pictures or you've seen the movie Le Mans. When you see a 917 for real, you realize like how tiny it is. I mean, it's small compared to a Mini Cooper.
Exactly.
An original Mini, not a new Mini, not a BMW. Like the original
Mini Cooper, yeah.
The 917
which is tiny.
Looks small, compared to like it's sitting next to that. So it's really this amazing car. And then to think right behind you is this V12 engine putting out flat 12 engine putting out over 500 horsepower. Yeah. And so to summarize the craziness of the 917, you have to look at the World Sports Car Championship, and I can't remember the year, whether it was 69 or 70, so excuse me for not getting the year right. But Formula One...
you, Paul. You are excused. You are more than excused.
I appreciate that. Formula One at Spa, so the racetrack Spa. So they raced sports cars there. They also raced Formula One cars there.
Right.
That same year the 917 was introduced, it was 6 seconds a lap faster than the Formula One cars were.
And that's a ridiculous. I mean, that's spaceships.
That's all you need to know about how revolutionary
that car
was. Where it was actually significantly faster than the equivalent Formula One car that same year. And so that's that car. And of course, it wasn't designed to do a 200-mile Formula One race. It was designed to do a 24-hour endurance race. Right. And so that's like, it's a whole other level. And you think about that Metzger engine, the engineering that went into that whole car, the whole drivetrain, that whole vehicle, that it was supposed to just run a 24-hour race, but it's capable of running speeds significantly faster than the Formula One cars of its same era. Correct. So that shows you how special that car was. And I remember talking to Vic Elford, who was the master at the Targa Florio, and he was the first guy to ever try and drive a 917 around the Targa Florio. Now, if you're not familiar with that race, the Targa Florio, I believe, was 47 or 49 miles, and it's in Sicily, and it goes through Palermo, and it's just mountain roads and through cities. So the equivalent today would be the Isle of Man TT.
Right, exactly.
Motorcycle race. It's kind of like the Isle of Man, but it was in the Sicilian mountains. And, and Isle of Man happens to be, as we're recording this podcast, it's going on this week.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So, catch it on
awesome.
Velocity. Yeah, set it up on, get it recording.
Okay.
Not much has happened so far. They've only had one day of racing. Unfortunately, they'd had one fatality on their very first race because it's a pretty... But anyway, but that's what Targa Florio was like. And they were doing this in the late 60s and into the 70s. And Vic was the first guy to take a 917 and around the Targa Florio course. And the 917, again, it was really fast, but it was also notoriously skittish initially. Right. They didn't have the aerodynamics really figured out. So the car had, this is a car not on the Targa Florio course, but at Le Mans doing 240 miles an hour down the Mulsanne. And so at high speeds, the rear end got a little unstable, and a lot of drivers came back, just ashen face, saying it's undrivable. A lot of people said it's undrivable. So he took it out on Targa Florio, and he was like, put me back in the 908. And he ended up winning that year in the 908 because the 917 was just basically too much of a car for Targa Florio, and it really wasn't built for that in the first place. They just wanted to try that flat 12 there and see what happened. But it was just a monster, right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about. Yeah. It was faster than an F1 car. It was too fast for the Targa Florio. It scared the heck out of its drivers initially. And what it did do, though, it didn't win its first year. They had retirements and crashes in '69. And then, as you were suggesting with the car that you were brokering,
Right.
that it did win the very next year and put Porsche on the map as not just a builder of good, quick little cars with four-cylinder engines or six-cylinder engines, but capable of taking the fight to and beating
Anything.
Ferrari.
Anything.
Yeah, and that's obviously what they did. And again, that fantastic movie,
Right.
Steve
Come on.
McQueen's basic, the movie that almost bankrupted him and his
Yep.
studio and
That's
stories
right.
that went along with that. So just a magical car, and I think Steve McQueen realized, like, it's worth the effort, and that's why this car now has this amazing, I would say it's a cult following.
Correct.
Though, like, cult followings are like a following that kind of goes beyond the reality, but this car's reality is every bit as amazing. And they didn't build a lot of them. And there's also these kind of crazy stories. I was lucky enough, I had a friend, a very close friend, that worked at the Canepa shop in Scotts Valley.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
Bruce Canepa has several 917s.
Right.
He's a guy with impeccable car taste. If you ever get a chance to go to Scotts Valley and walk around his museum-like shop,
It's ridiculous. I know.
It's mind-bending.
I know.
Because
He's got a
he's
250
cool.
LM there. I know.
Yeah, well, he's got everything. He even has dune buggies.
Right.
He has vintage dragsters. He has hot rods, and then he has so he has this super eclectic taste, but it's impeccable taste. Like, whatever he has
Right.
will
is
it's
immaculate.
like that significant one. The
Right.
dune buggy he has is Porsche powered, and it's really cool. It was ran Baja with a flat six. So,
What
he
is
has
it?
all
A flat six from the 90s, from the 80s?
No, it's from the 80s. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's really a cool car. It has this whole amazing history behind it that I couldn't even begin to do justice to. Just remember, like, bits and pieces of it. But
Right.
like everything in Bruce's shop has this, like, hour story that goes with it,
Right. Exactly.
And so the 917 is probably the central component out of all of the amazing stuff that he does, because
Right.
he sort of became the de facto restorer in the U.S. of the 917, because there were so few made, and of course they're also very fragile. We're talking about
Right.
cars made, decades and decades ago.
Right.
But you could imagine, like, the parts, like if you want pistons, connecting rods, cylinder
It all
heads,
has to be custom made.
valve springs, yeah.
Machine.
And so actually every part in the world for those cars, as far as all the experts know, they're all accounted for, and they're all
Right.
kind of living in a couple different locations. Like, there was this Flatout Pollock, who was this Polish entrepreneur that lived in California, and he ended up buying a lot of the 917s, because the thing about race cars, like, we talk about them now and they're so revered, like,
Right.
and they're worth tens of millions of dollars. They're
Like
a rejected bid for $23 million, right? Case
Right.
in point, for one car.
Right.
But you got to realize, like, a race car,
back
the
then,
year
10 grand.
after it's not competitive, yeah, you could walk up and they're like, make me an offer.
Exactly.
Ferrari was just 12 cars away.
They were dying to give them away.
Yeah, there's nothing with less value than a year-old uncompetitive race car. And
Right.
no one has the crystal ball to look into the future and go, you know what, in 40, 50 years, this thing will be
it's gonna
priceless.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
So we all want the time machine to go back and buy all these cars, right?
Right.
And
That's for sure.
and so like the sort of the chain of events that kind of led to, the Vlasic Pollock buying all of the parts, and now those parts ended up getting bought, and they're back with a company in Germany that owns all those bits and pieces now. But I was lucky enough when I was at Canepa that they were rebuilding an engine in the shop. And so there was a gentleman there by the name of Mr. Nietzsche.
Okay.
And I remember that because of the philosopher.
Right, exactly.
He's a lovely guy, and I went and had dinner with him and my friend. We went out and had dinner that night, and we just chatted all night, and he was telling me all these stories about 917 parts.
Right.
And so he personally knows of all of the 917s in the world, and he personally works on them. So they actually all come through one guy, and he is like 82 years old.
Holy shit!
And
So every single 917 that's being serviced or being anything that's going through him, strictly.
He has his hands on it, on some way, shape, or form. and the thing that's amazing is you're thinking like how important these cars are, and he's not
Right.
a young man anymore.
Right.
And so at dinner, I was like, I've got to bring that up.
Of course.
and, and so
Topic of
I was
discussion.
like, out of deepest respect, I'm just curious, what happens when you're gone to
Right,
the
exactly.
cars? And he goes, don't worry, I have an apprentice. And I was like, oh, that's
Okay.
fantastic.
That's good.
And he's like, he's 62. And I went,
Oh
no,
my.
no.
So he's only going to last about 30, 40 years too.
Yeah.
Shit.
So when you see a 917, you need to consider all of
Everything.
that.
Everything.
Like how special this car is
Right.
on every level. Like a component, like if you're thinking of like a shim, because they use shims to set the valves on the cars.
Right.
You know, you think about like all of these components, and you think about like every time one of these gets crashed or one of them gets over revved,
Scratched.
you know, like what is the shock wave, the ripple effect around
Right.
the world for like that very limited supply. And so they are starting to reproduce bits and pieces of 917s
Right.
as they sort of expire, because a lot of the cars are made of magnesium, you know,
Exactly.
bits and pieces of the cars, and magnesium has a very limited shelf life compared to aluminum or stainless steel or titanium.
I didn't.
So
I didn't know that. I thought magnesium. What's the
it
shelf life on
basically
magnesium?
it kind of depends on the conditions that
Right.
it's kept under, but basically it sort of just falls to dust over time. It corrodes and deteriorates to the point that you can't use it anymore.
Oh shit! I didn't know
And
that.
so you
I
get
feel
like
stupid for not knowing
magnesium
that.
wheels. And I know this from Ducati motorcycles and things, which I have like an old Ducati.
Right.
And you know, so magnesium components, magnesium cases, they use triple clamps. There's just, you know, bits and pieces that were cast in magnesium back in the day. Magnesium wheels were very, very common hubs. Magnesium was like the go-to exotic material,
Metal.
like one step up from aluminum, because
Right.
no one could really work with titanium very well then, and carbon
Right.
fiber wasn't around. So
Right.
you find a lot of these old race cars are magnesium, and people can recast magnesium now, but that's what you have to do. Is if you want to keep the car authentic, you go and you have to, you know, recast an engine block, a cylinder head, or what have you in magnesium.
Right.
So that's all of these this sort of this ecosystem, and what in England they would call a cottage industry on supporting these cars. And this is just a 917 story, but you can go and you can say the same story about a, you know, a Testarossa Ferrari or what have you, you know, like any of these old, I mean, like an old original 250 TR, right? Not a
Right.
80 Testarossa, you know, so any of these older vintage cars kind of are falling into this. And of course now it's kind of interesting because you got like this graph of the value of the car, and it's almost shooting up. And then of course things that like 10 years ago, like, oh, no way we would ever go to any sort of lengths to actually cast these new pieces or whatever. The cars aren't worth it. But then the
And now they're
value of the
doing
car,
Right.
at some point there's a crossover, and they're like, oh, now it's worth it. And
Exactly.
so, and you can see that, you know, again, you can go back and you can look at things like, you know, even like a Black Shadow, you know, motorcycle, or even the Brow Superior. So you can look in any of the vintage world, or think of like old Bugatti cars,
Right.
old Maseratis, or any of these cars, Auto Unions, Mercedes Benz, you know, any of those vehicles, they've reached that crossover point where the car now exceeds so much value that all of a sudden they're like, we
Now it's
can make
worth it.
anything for the
Right.
car. I'll give you like the ultimate version of that. That's not even cars or motorcycles, but World War II aircraft. So
Oh,
if
yeah.
you think about like a Supermarine Spitfire,
Right.
like you're allowed to now, if you can just go dig out of a swamp. Like there's all these stories in World War II, back in the day, from farmers or what have you, people that
Right.
witnessed a plane crashing, and usually that plane is sat in the mud under 30 feet of mud, or in a lake, and they
Right.
pull the thing out. There's nothing left of it, but what they're looking for is just the chassis plate, the number, the serial number
That's all
in
they're
the
looking
car, in a
for, so they
car,
could.
say the VIN plate.
Right.
If you can get that, you're allowed to, because you think of like, you know, FAA and all that stuff. Like,
Mhm.
well, we don't want you taking this rotten plane and trying to put it back in the sky.
Yeah. Exactly.
You can just take the
That'd be a
VIN
bad
plate.
idea.
you can take the VIN plate and you can officially say that's this airplane, as long as you have the VIN plate, the original VIN plate on the aircraft.
Wow.
And so everything else, every other component can be remanufactured.
Manufactured. Wow. That's amazing.
And there was actually a story, this crazy story about an auto union where one guy had the VIN plate and the other guy had the car, and the car was actually in Russia. A bunch of auto unions ended up in Russia.
Yeah.
That were war reparations after World War II. So when
Correct.
we were splitting up Germany between the Allied forces, of course, Russia was on our side back then,
right.
In World War II. So the Russians, as war reparations, took a bunch of auto unions to Russia. And so there were a bunch of these. It's a fascinating story, by the way, where you can go do research on this. But these auto unions sat in Russia, so they kind of both showed up at an auction at the same time or within a very close period, and they both had the same number because one was rebuilt off the VIN plate, and one was the actual car that had been in Russia. And I may be mixing those facts up just a tiny bit, but you get the idea.
Right.
That's what, to get back to the 917, that is the crazy world. And you personally, like, you're dealing with the uber wealthy that sort of make all this happen, because they're the ones that are going, yeah, I'll pay $20-some million for a 917. So some guy's got a chassis plate from a wrecked 917, and he's like, all of a sudden, he's like, holy cow, he looks.
This is worth some money.
Yeah. It was just something I kept in my desk drawer as a souvenir. Exactly. But now I'm going to build a car around it because I could build a car for $10 or $15 million, and yet I could sell it for $20-some million. And that all, that's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and the same thing happens with aircraft. The same thing happens with motorcycles, with Vincent motorcycles or Brow motorcycles that have huge value now. And that's the world we live in,
There's there's so much information, Paul. It just came amazing. You could fit any half of what you just said in your brain, but I totally understand, man. It's the same thing here. It's you try to get, passion is what drives the brain. You know what I'm saying? In all aspects of life.
And then money drives the industry.
Exactly.
And demand. Yeah. Put those two things together, and that's the world we live in.
That's right. Yeah, no, what I was going to say was, that's amazing, the story about the auto unions. I know that there was, I wanted to be better prepared for this spot, but I knew that all the information I was going to try to cram into my brain before I spoke to you. But there was an just because you brought it up, there was an auto union that got sold. I believe it was, it was one, I don't want to say it's chassis 1 because I'm probably going to get misquoted, but I believe it was one of the earlier chassis, 1 through, I think it was, let's just say it was 1 through 7 or 1 through 10. And that one went up for auction. I think it went up for auction, and it went for a little bit above 30. I think that was the price on the car. And this was 5-6 years ago. I think it was at the Auto Geneva Convention Center. They introduced it there. And then they were going to take it to either RM or Sotheby's. I don't think it was going to be Sotheby's. It was going to be either RM. I don't even remember the car. And the car was immaculate. It looked like it was back in 1940 something when the car was built. But the stories that you tell me about the airplanes, the Spitfires, and the fact that you could just literally get the plane. Where would even someone go? I mean, how massive do the CNC machines that would have to be literally made just for certain parts of that aircraft?
They're not CNCing them. They're hand building them. Like there's actually a few different, again, cottage industry.
Right.
This stuff usually exists in the UK. Funny enough, like even restoring Messerschmitts, because the UK England is a little bit unique in that sort of. And I think this has a lot to do with like all the Formula One teams, with the exception of like Sauber and Ferrari, are based in England. So even Mercedes is based in England, the Formula One team, because England has it's a small country, and it's very densely packed with a crazy level of engineering and machining. Like I've worked personally with Lola.
Wow,
and
that's awesome.
And with like gearbox manufacturers like Hewland and X-Track, and just all the racing that I've done over my life. And I was responsible for building a bespoke carbon formula car for the Jim Russell Racing Driver School,
Okay.
which is a really cool experience. So I worked directly with
Yeah.
Lola on that. But you realize, like no joke, like within a stone's throw of anything in England is everything in England.
Oh yeah.
And so they have this ability to kind of reproduce anything you want. Like you think about like the panel shaping for aluminum, or in England, my dad would correct me and say aluminium. You mean? And I'd be like, yes, Dad. Yes. And I was actually born in England, but I grew up in the U.S. So
I heard on that. Yeah, I was just gonna.
Gives me a hard time about that. So, but you know, like the body shaping is done on a piece of manual machinery called an English wheel.
So it's like a manual, like a mandrel bending machine, but for
they just roll bending. It back and forth between these two wheels, and these two wheels have spring-loaded pressure between them, and as you roll aluminium between the wheels. You can keep rolling it back and forth, and you can shape it into a fender or any other shape that you want. So it's part of, like you do the hand paneling over a wooden buck. Right. But all of that kind of stuff is like how a Spitfire was built too.
Right.
Where they had, and that was actually one of the very first metal aircraft that only had cloth in the tail section. The rest of the Spitfire was all aluminum, including the spars and all of that stuff. So you can rebuild all of that stuff. There really isn't any CNC because that wouldn't be authentic.
Right.
And they build that plane to the same level, just like a Concours winning automobile. Like if you're going to have remanufactured bits and pieces, you can't modernize it even to make it better. Right. It has to be. The only exceptions that you're allowed, and they probably even will score you down on a Concours for this, but it's safety stuff like the fuel lines, things like that. You're like, well, the fuel lines were terrible, and these cars used to catch on fire all the time. Do you mean my car is going to catch on fire, or can I put a better fuel line in it? Right. And you're allowed to put a better fuel line in it, but it better from the outside look exactly like the original fuel line.
Wow. See that I think is
they give you.
It's. I mean, I understand why they do that, but I think that's a bit overkill. It's like But I understand when it's a Concours car, it has to be Pebble Beach.
That's why unrestored cars are so valuable, because they're like, oh, it didn't catch on fire, and no one's changed the fuel line. Right. That's a really rare car, or the spoke wheels, or the magnesium just randomly breaks. Like I've had magnesium wheels break on me when I've been racing. So
are you serious?
What? Yeah, absolutely.
What are we talking about? What were we at 10, 15 years? I mean, how short? I didn't know it was that short changed.
Magnesium, it's very light, but it also
it's very light.
It's fatiguing, sort of qualities compared to, again, these days you would use a forged aluminum, or you'd go titanium. Of course, you'd go carbon fiber. So
it's susceptible to heat.
Then they're underbuilding. Think of like Colin Chapman and his whole adding lightness thing. So he's casting things out of magnesium and then making them a lot smaller than they probably ought to have been.
Right.
And that's what. But if you want to build a vintage Lotus, you've got to use all of Colin's bits and pieces. Right. And we know those things crashed and hurt and killed a lot of drivers back in the day.
Right.
And when they weren't doing that, they were winning championships with those cars, which made them also iconic cars in sort of the vintage world, and for good reason. But those are all the things you have to balance. And it's almost like, if you went back in the day, no one thought of those cars necessarily as being a real safety hazard. They were built to be as light and as safe as possible, just like a current car. They just didn't have the knowledge, the computer-aided design, the materials that we're able to work with today. And now we can, we kind of, you can look into they can life apart now. If you think of like a Formula One team building a part, they know exactly how long it's going to last.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's that much R&D effort involved. And knowledge to go into that. And a computer will, no joke, spit out a lifespan for that part. Like you need to replace that bolt this amount of time because it's under this sort of sheer tension, compression force, and we made it out of this material, and it will last exactly this long.
Right. Yeah.
They didn't know that then. It was all done by guys like, that gentleman I mentioned who was working at Porsche back in the day on the 917s. It was just his knowledge passed on to his apprentices. Like it was accumulated knowledge from racing auto unions in 1938 and 39. Right. That same knowledge was helping them build 917s in 1969.
Exactly.
You know, that's where everyone would say, oh, that was sort of a black art. When it was a black art, it meant it wasn't really written down. It was passed down
Right.
from
From
engineer
generation.
to engineer, from
Right.
mechanic to mechanic.
Right.
But that knowledge still moved and it still grew, and that database got deeper and they got smarter and they built faster and faster cars as a result of it.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned so many things. So one of the things that really surprised me, going back to the 917, one of the things that, and by the way, I sent you an email with a PDF professionally that I had gotten from the owner, just to, so you could have it. I was going to have you go through it just so you could see the picture of the actual car that we're talking about. The actual car that we're talking about, by the way, Paul, it's chassis 4.
Okay.
Yeah, it's chassis 004. And there's a picture there of what you kind of went back to earlier, was the seating arrangement and the fact of how small that car was.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I mean, one of the things that we first talked about before we even got on the podcast was that, I think, and this is one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about, was how racing, like what we're talking about right now. I mean, you just put it in plain English. You're talking about that this was firstly, I mean, these cars were only being produced by people that had the automotive experience, that were there building the car and knew the exact lifespan of the metals, or knew how long or what type of materials that we're going to actually putting, to build this entire ridiculous, insane rocket ship on wheels. And one of the things that I think that we've lost in racing, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I've gone to plenty of racetrack days. I've been, I've spoken to many different people, race car drivers and, team owners. And something that I think is missing, I mean, I hate to put it this way, but in my view, I would look at it as a castration of racing, because it's like a lot of things about racing that you literally needed a certain amount of courage even to get into these cars, just because of the safety factor, the safety technology that just was not there. I mean, I'm looking at the picture right now, and it's literally a 4-point harness that maybe you'd put on a street car with a couple hundred horsepower, 600, 700, 800 horsepower, and you'd feel pretty safe in. This was a car that weighed, I believe the 917 weighed 1,300, I think, wet, 1,300 pounds. And it had like what we talked about, 500 something plus horsepower. So if you compare that to horsepower per ton to, let's say, the Bugatti Chiron, LaFerrari, the 918, the P1, it's not even in the same realm. You'd have to bring in the Aero Atom and bring in that V8 Aero Atom, which was, I think, had it was 1,000.
No, and I've driven those. The problem with what you're saying right now is you're comparing road cars to a race car.
Oh no, of course. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that even race car wise, is that the essence of, I don't know, man. It's very strange. I've gone to the racetrack and going back to what we were going to start talking about, which was Can-Am. So, one of the reasons that I think Can-Am was the peak of manufacturers, race car drivers, racing technology, minus the safety technology because there wasn't any there, but most of the safety technology that they had back then, and the racetracks, was that it was, hey, listen, you bring the best team, you bring the best car, you bring the best engineers, you bring the best driver, you give me the best racetrack, and we will show you the fastest times possible in these amazing machines that were built at that time. A lot of what's going on now is that, like, let's say for example, what's going on in Formula One. So I haven't watched a Formula One race in 9 years, and I'll tell you why. It's just the fact that, I mean, first of all, I missed the screaming V10s. That those things were just, I mean, when you wanted to go see a Formula One race car, that was what you were going for. That was one of the aspects that you were just waiting to, have a flyby of that thing. Your ears just bleed. And, and just, it just, I mean, you feel when you're next to a Formula One car, when that thing is just on idle, you feel the insides of your body just shaking. And I think that's what motorsport is supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be this tamed, this safety. Everybody keeps on talking about how safe things have to be, and it's like, no. I agree that we don't want race car drivers like you and other race car drivers that are out there, getting severely hurt. That was one of the problems that happened in Can-Am, where you had all these deaths, especially at Spa, because of the straightaway. And that's when they finally decided the rules and regulations said that they had to put the kink in the straightaway. And then
Yeah,
you had cars.
you meant Le Mans. You said Spa, but I get it.
Oh well, but at Spa there was a remember there was a straightaway. What was the famous? I think it was Spa. It's the
Well, Spa, they did change the course. Yeah, you're right. So
yeah,
they had the one that ran through the villages and all that stuff, the longer version. Yeah,
correct.
So
And that longer version, that's when these cars, I believe that 917 was one of the first cars in the world that did 250. I think it was 248.
that was Le Mans that it was doing that.
It was
so
a
Spa
Le
had
Mans.
already
Okay.
Spa had already been changed basically at that point, I believe. But
Okay.
I mean, to your point, so I guess there's a couple different ways to look at it. First of all, it's like if they knew then what we know now, would they have still built the cars the same way? And you'd have to answer, of course not. They would have built the cars of today, because this is what's logical to build. So I get what you're talking about is like it's a bit of a romanticized view of motorsports, and I'll tell you, like, knowing Derek Bell, I was teammates with him. We were both driving on the same factory racing team for Volvo in the early 2000s, and he's a great guy, and I got to know him very well. And I happened to be at his house one day, and as you can imagine, he's such a legendary driver. He gets people sending him random things in the mail all the time.
Right.
And the day I was at his house, someone sent him a new book that was about Formula One in his era. And the opening picture in the book, and I can't remember the name, but the opening picture of the book was how they take that year, the early in the year photograph of all the drivers lined up. They're sitting on the straightaway of the racetrack. The front row's in chairs, and the back row's like standing up behind them. And he looks at the photo, and he starts scanning his finger across all the faces in the top and the bottom row. And he said, right now, there's only 2 of us that are still alive.
Wow. Yeah, they're all dead.
And he kind of he teared up, man.
Yeah.
So we look back and we're like, wow, that's when racing was racing.
Right.
But the thing you've got to remember is this stuff. Like, so we're talking about auto unions in 38, 39. In 1939, Germany invades Poland. Okay? World War II starts. Auto unions, Mercedes, stop racing. They don't come over and win the Vanderbilt Cup in New York, which they had done like the year before that. It stops. And we got World War II. And we've got, hey, we were talking about Spitfires and Mustangs and Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs and Lancasters. And we had all these young guys, 17, 18, 19 years old, going off into war as infantrymen or flying aircraft. And millions of them don't come back, right? And this is a true world war where it's operating in the Pacific theater, it's operating on an eastern front in Europe, we've got a western front in Europe. Like it's wholesale slaughter of young men, right?
That's right.
So it ends in 45. Drop the bomb, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. The war's over.
Right.
A few years later, it doesn't take long. Racing kicks up again, and who are all the drivers? They're a bunch of pilots. They're a bunch of people that are used to this ridiculous level of risk. As a matter of fact, if you think like PTSD and you think about modern soldiers coming back from Iraq, and more of them die in road crashes and on motorcycles every year when they come back than they do when they're deployed, because they tend to ride the bikes and they drive. In a way, they're like seeking the thrill of combat.
Right. That's correct.
So that's kind of part of all of this. And so motor racing kicks back up, and these guys are out driving cars. And are they thinking much about safety? No. They think this is
this is
awesome.
awesome.
Think about it, they're like, this is way safer than the war I was just in.
Right. This is a walk in the park for them.
A few guys are dying. I get it. But it's not nearly, watching my buddies drop left and right as, hey, right now actually is the 75th anniversary of D-Day.
Right.
So not only is it Isle of Man, it's a pretty, we can link a lot of things to our conversation here.
Right.
But they're doing D-Day reenactments. I was just reading how the Army Rangers are climbing up Omaha Beach, right?
Holy
that's
shit.
what they did this morning.
That's
they did
insane.
it this morning in a reenactment.
That's amazing.
And so that was their mentality coming back from war, those lucky ones that survived.
Right.
And they were looking for cool stuff to do, and they're kind of like looking for that. Yeah,
filling
being
that
in
gap
combat,
of
as
that
horrific as it is a bit of a drug, right? It's
right.
it
It
for any
is.
thrill
Oh
seeker.
yeah,
And so
without a
so
doubt.
they're coming back and they're going racing.
Right.
And so that's kind of the mentality that's transitioning into motorsports all over the world. Is this, I'm not going to say it's like laissez-faire, like I don't care about safety, but
Right.
again, they're building the cars as safe as they knew it, but they were just flying Spitfires and Mustangs over the English Channel doing escort missions,
Right.
into Germany, dodging flak, and again, watching their buddies randomly just get killed.
Yeah.
So motorsports in the day looked pretty safe.
Right.
And so we look at it, none of us have been to battle. We're too young. There hasn't been a major war. And so we look at safety through a completely
Like a
different
secondary,
lens than
third.
they do.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
it's not fair to judge them and their safety standards because they were building what they thought were safe, as
Right.
safe as they could build them. But also I want to win races with the thing. They were
Right.
trying to strike that balance just like today.
Right.
And just like today, they did, again, if they had the technology to know what magnesium and carbon fiber and titanium would do for their race cars, they would have done it,
Yeah, they
but
would
they
have done it.
didn't. They were doing the best with what they had. They were doing the best with what they had with safety. And there was this little bit of an attitude, and it took Jackie Stewart actually to really
See, there you go.
change
That's
things.
what I'm talking about. See, that's what I'm talking about. Jackie Stewart. I mean, that's one of the
And he was
famous
hated
race
at
drivers.
that time.
Right.
He was
When he
hated
drove
at
the
that time.
SLR, when he drove the original SLR, that was, I mean, he described it. I watched a whole bunch of videos and interviews when they talked to him about winning at what was the race in Europe? It was man, I'm like getting blocks in my head here. It was a race that goes, I think it's 20 something miles. It goes up a mountain. It goes down through the Swiss Alps, I think, and it comes all the way back down to Italy.
I think you're thinking of the Mille Miglia.
Yeah, the Mille Miglia. There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So the Mille Miglia was before his day, and Sterling Moss was the person,
Sterling
the
Moss.
British
I'm
driver.
sorry. That's
but then
what
he
was.
drove.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So that was Sterling Moss, and with Dennis Jenkinson, who was the famous photographer that was his co-driver when they set the record in the SLR.
Correct.
But Jackie, and so there were incremental improvements in safety, but a lot of it had to do with sort of the budgets of motorsports back in the day. So there wasn't any sort of organization for safety, and there wasn't any budget. Like Spa didn't have a budget to run guardrail around the track.
Right, exactly.
So none of that stuff really existed, and it took Jackie sort of raising his hand in the late 60s and early 70s, going, this is not acceptable. And he organized the drivers to the point where they could boycott races. That created the leverage that forced the changes. And Jackie was like, he was talking about him at Spa, speaking of the old Spa. He had a crash where he could have bled to death if it weren't for the good graces of the people that just happened to be standing as spectators next to him and saved his life. Because there was no ambulances nearby to come and help him. So it was that kind of perfect storm. And again, talking about sort of that swashbuckling attitude of the drivers fresh back from World War II, they didn't like Jackie saying this stuff because he was they were like, you're hurting our image. We're supposed to be the modern day, in their era, fighter pilots. We don't care about safety. We drive 200-mile-an-hour cars on public roads. That's our thing. That's what we do. And yeah, it's got a short life expectancy, but the thrill is amazing and it's worth it. So Jackie was sort of battling that mentality, and it took a long time. And I'll admit it, because I was only really, I was born in '65, so I'm pretty old, but I was really young.
I thought you were younger. I thought you were like in your 50s.
Yeah, I was. Well, I am. I'm 54.
Okay, 54. There we go.
Yeah. So I was born in '65. So I was 5 years old, but I was already a fan of the sport. So I remember things from back then.
Oh no, yeah. I think we all do.
So I see. I saw that, and I didn't really like Jackie initially, though. So now I admire everything he's done, and I got to work with him with Ford. Actually, ironically, maybe not ironically, but in Russia, I worked with Jackie Stewart when Ford first went to Russia in like 1997, and he's an amazing guy. Have
You got to
nothing,
work
nothing.
with Jackie Stewart, dude? That's
Yeah,
awesome.
he and I actually went head to head on an autocross course that I set up.
No way. What, like in the parking lot or something right
Yeah,
before you guys took?
yeah, in the parking lot of the University of Moscow. That's even better, right?
Wow. That's
So
awesome.
yeah,
That's
so
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 cool.
he was like super competitive and he's
Of course.
fast, and the guy's butter smooth and he's fast.
Right.
It was really really impressive. These
What
are
cars? What cars
just a
did you
bunch of
guys send?
Fords, just a bunch of Fords. I think it was a Ford Puma. They never
Oh,
sold here, but it's a cool
yeah,
little
that's
front wheel drive Ford.
Russian.
So that's what kind of, and it goes through, safety finally takes a foothold with Jackie because he organizes the drivers, right?
Right.
So that was the game changer for track safety, was the drivers actually getting organized and having leverage and forcing it. And then that, if you think about all of that, then that created the commercial side of motorsports, because all of a sudden the tracks had to think about, like, how are we going to raise money to
Right.
do these improvements because we want
Right.
this race. And so motorsports slowly became commercialized through the 70s because the costs of running a race, and also, of course, the team costs too, because the technology is going lockstep along with the tires, which really drive all the technology in a race
Right.
car. It's like how much grip the tire has. All of a sudden, you have to update your race car, and
Correct.
that pushes things forward. So the tire is the driver of technology in the cars, just like it is in MotoGP or what have you.
Right.
People usually think it's the other way around, but it's not. And then it's the cost of actually running the race, because now I got to run guardrail around Spa, right?
Right.
And that's really expensive. So, and I've got to have medical teams everywhere because it's a big track, and that's expensive, and so
Right.
on and so forth. So that's how you get that exponential cost. And then motorsports suddenly requires sponsorship to even operate.
Right.
And so that gets to your point about the commercialization of racing when you said, I haven't watched an F1 race in 9 years. It's Jackie's fault. That's my point.
Well, I wouldn't. Well, I wouldn't. I mean, I know what you're saying, and I'm glad that he did what he did for bringing safety to basically the technology to what we have today with the Hans device and all the carbon. I mean, every
Yeah,
single thing you could think of, helmets, the
the
fire
death of Dale
retardant suits.
Earnhardt, right? The
Right.
death of Dale Earnhardt, Hans device.
Exactly. So
Yep.
I'm not against. This is what I'm saying, and this is what I really wanted to ask you. The solid question is, if we are so safe now, right, where you could literally crash most race cars today at 200 miles per hour, at literally maybe 30, 40, sometimes even, I mean, dead on impact, straight through that 30 degrees, maybe 45 degrees, but I'm just saying as close to as a straight line as you could think of into a wall, and literally leave the car with maybe a headache. I mean, shouldn't, okay, this is what I'm saying. Shouldn't Shouldn't everything be going faster? Shouldn't all the cars be going faster? And they are, mechanically, they had to bring, I mean, look what they had to do with Formula One. They had to bring mechanical grip back into the game because they were losing audience. Like Formula One, diehard fans were just like, this isn't entertaining enough. I'm not seeing anybody die for, you know,
Absolutely.
I'm not seeing anybody die for a proper an entry. I'm not seeing anybody die for a for first or second or third. And
No,
so
no
these are
one wants to see anyone. No one wants to see anyone. Are you saying die?
no, yeah, exactly. No, I'm not. No, no, no.
Yeah.
I'm saying
Well, no one
no.
wants to see that, but they want to think that it's possible.
Right.
They want to know that that's there, that it's that dangerous. And so it's a balance that has to be struck, right? Where, and I think the word you're looking for, that you want in motorsports, is it needs to be a spectacle.
Well, I
The
mean, I
word
don't. I
spectacle.
want to. I
Let
want
me
it to be
explain.
more competitive. I want it to
Yes, but let me
become
explain the word
more.
spectacle,
Okay.
because
Tell me.
spectacle covers everything you want.
Right.
Spectacle includes the presumption of risk, right? It also is the noise of the V10 or the V12
That's
engines.
right.
It's the visceral scared to
Experience.
watch that car
The
when it comes
experience.
by and you're like,
Holy
he
shit.
should be braking now.
Yeah.
Why isn't he braking? I'm about to watch a crash. He's still at full throttle, pulling upshifts, and you're going, he's going to crash so hard. And then the thing brakes at the 50 marker
That's right.
from 220 miles an hour and somehow makes the corner. and you will never forget that moment when you first see it.
That's right.
That spectacle, right? So you're trying to create spectacle. And to your point of they had to add a bunch of grip back into the cars, you're exactly right. They finally realized that, and that's a big issue that I have with Jean Todt and the FIA is
Right.
them thinking they know better than the fans when
Right.
it comes to the spectacle.
Right.
And they're like, no, the fans will appreciate the strategy of the pit stops. That's where all the passes are going to happen. Our fans are very sophisticated. They don't need to see real passing occurring on the track.
Bullshit.
You know, and so that's the mentality. They're going to like that the cars are quiet. It's going to be okay because they'll appreciate that they're hybrids. But we know that that is true of a certain percentage of people, but it is not the majority of motorsports fans who are there for a spectacle, right? The spectacle is everything. It is the hair standing up on the back of my neck. It is, I'm worried for these drivers. These cars are so fast. I can't believe how fast they're going, you know, and then the driver takes on this hero-like status, this almost super-like status.
Yeah, superhuman, exactly.
But if the car, if you go to a Formula E race and you're like,
oh my God,
I was driving a Porsche GT3 this morning around a racetrack, that Porsche GT3 is faster than a Formula E car around a racetrack.
Right.
And it'll drive a lot longer. And so that's not right.
Right. Yeah, that's what I've been.
But a modern Formula One car, by the way, they're louder than you realize. They've made them louder in the last couple of years. They're not quiet anymore. They don't sound like a V12 or a V10. I get that, but they're not quiet.
The V6 twin turbos? Oh yeah.
Yes.
They're not bad, but they're not.
But they are ungodly fast. So if you go watch where they're braking and watch how hard these cars accelerate, it will scare you to death. There is spectacle again in Formula One since the 2017 rule changes when they added the wider tires and more downforce. And again, we can argue back and forth, and everyone does, about whether that's improved the actual passing and the racing.
Right.
But it has made the cars, I think they're 6 or 7 seconds a lap faster than they were in 2015 and 16.
Right.
And so these cars are the fastest race cars that have ever been. You remember the 919 Evo went and beat Lewis Hamilton at Spa, the track record. But the next year they went back with the changes, and they're now faster again than the 919 Evo.
Which
because
is huge.
They're so fast right now, it's crazy. Yeah. So to realize they're even going to race wheel to wheel with how quickly these cars can accelerate or decelerate, you appreciate that. And it kind of makes your initial point, I'm not going to say moot, but it does negate it a little bit, because the level of talent it takes to twirl all those knobs on that steering wheel and drive that car as fast as it is during a race with 19 other people doing the same thing, trying to beat you, it is a level of human achievement that is impressive. Right. And so what Hamilton and company are doing in a Formula One car right now, and Verstappen, the level of driving that's going on in that series is on par with anything that has happened in history in a race car. Right. They are driving the hell out of those things. And so, you know, don't think they're not trying harder. And maybe they're even trying a little bit harder because they realize that they are safer. So they're actually pushing the spectacle even more so, because we'll definitely do something. And I do have a little bit, and we didn't talk about it, so I'll mention it now, but I do have a little bit of background in sports psychology and physiology, because I've been training people how to drive race cars for 30 plus years, and I wrote a book called Optimum Drive.
Correct, which I was going to bring up. I'm sorry, I was supposed to bring it up in the beginning.
No worries. It's the perfect time to do it. It's relevant. So I understand the physiology and the psychology of what goes on in a racing driver's head from people that I train at very high levels to entry level to myself as a professional racing driver. So I know what they're doing in those cars and how hard it is. And would I like to see them with an H-pattern manual gearbox and all? Yeah. I mean,
the Lotus. Remember the V8 Lotus, the which was the Formula One cars. I forgot their name. They had a specific chassis name, which was the ones that had the smaller, just a little bit smaller. Yeah, they were the ones that had the smaller smaller tires up front. They were, I think, 2 inches smaller than the
No,
rears.
that was the Taro, the
Yes.
Taro 6-wheel Taro.
Yes. No, not the 6-wheel. That was like the craziest version of that. But the cars they were 4-wheel, but they just had a smaller diameter front wheel and front tire, and then the rears were, I mean, they look like fucking bigger than F1 wheels that we saw in the 90s. And
those big balloon tires in the back. Those cars tended to understeer a lot, by the way.
Oh yeah, for sure. But that was
good.
That was the point, though. That was like, it was an impossible car to try to get around a corner, and people still managed to, hey, listen, let me learn to see with the car how it reacts. Let me learn how it reacts, at below 50, at above 100 when I'm trying to shoot for an apex.
But that's never good. I'm just going to say understeer is never
for sure.
good.
Of course not.
So it's like you could design a better car than that. It doesn't
do that.
It's better. But it's always like that within racing. I mean, that's the nature of racing. Is it's the cutting edge of technology, and it's more so cutting edge than really anything else that's going on, because there's more money per F1 car happening than there is that SpaceX is doing, into the rocket. Like a rocket is a simple thing compared to a Formula One car. It has to be, because it has to be stone reliable, because it's going into space, for God's sake.
Right.
But a Formula One car, it's like SpaceX is competing, but they're not competing with a lot of other people. You think of like the F1 teams competing with each other. They're pushing technology as far as down the path of diminishing return, further than really any other engineering exercise that exists on the planet.
Right.
What's going on? And you watch Red Bull has this video called The Life of a Bolt.
I haven't seen it.
It's crazy. It just shows like the designing of a single bolt that goes in that car, because they make their own nuts and bolts. They make everything themselves.
Every single component on the car.
And so you look at that, and so could the racing be better? It could be better, but the fact of the matter is that it's as good as it can be, considering how complicated the equation is now, since Jackie Stewart organized the drivers and it turned into a commercial enterprise where they have a lot of different people to please, not just the fans. They've got to build road cars based on it. They've got this reputation, that reputation. They got partners like you think of Shell and all of those people. Yeah, they have skin in the game too. What kind of fuel, our oil, our additives, all of those things. So they're getting pulled in 1,000 different directions.
Yeah.
That nobody really was back in the 60s and 70s, when it was just like some garageista teams. Literally, Terrell and Lotus were in garages, like sheds, like old farm buildings, building Formula One cars, going out and taking on Ferrari. That's actually how things were happening in the mid 60s. And it was like, oh, yeah, it's great. It's like, it can't be that anymore.
No, of course.
It just can't. And it's now become so big. And then you think, oh, let's throw in commercial television rights into the mix.
Right.
And the billions of dollars that is worth. And you look at the commercial, all the different directions that pulls. And I'm actually like, I'm gonna be sort of bittersweet about Formula One and racing in general. But the fact of the matter is, it's still pretty darn good, and the level of cars and competition is insane, and it is driving the whole industry forward. And I would say, if you want to see just spectacular racing, just go watch MotoGP.
Oh no, yeah, that's a whole different level of.
If you watch the Mugello race that was just a couple days ago, Mugello, Italy, the amount of passing that's going on in MotoGP, because again, they're simple. There's very simple vehicles, and of course you can fit 15 motorcycles side by side on a racetrack where you could barely fit 3 cars.
Fit like 3 cars, exactly.
And they have the availability of doing some different lines and things like that the cars can't do. So the bike racing has amazing passing that goes on, and there's amazing racing, and I watch it equally with the car racing because I just enjoy the racing. But I still enjoy Formula One, because those cars, like I said, the visceral spectacle of how fast those cars are. So I like the racing of MotoGP, but a Formula One car is about 45 seconds a lap quicker around the same racetrack.
Right.
It's not even close.
It's the
like
downforce.
A good road car. It's not just downforce, but it's also
and mechanical grip.
It's also center gravity.
exactly, center of
You can
gravity,
only
and right.
brake a bike at 1.7
Yeah.
G, or you flip over the
Yeah,
handlebars.
you have exactly. You have a lot of limitations with the drivers, so that the
Yeah,
riders.
yeah.
That's a
A
huge.
motorcycle versus a a two-wheeled vehicle versus a four-wheeled vehicle.
Yeah.
Very different physics going on there. So, but my point is like there's great racing in MotoGP, and they're going really slow
Right.
relative to a Formula One car.
Right.
There's an amazing spectacle watching Formula One. Yeah, there's only 5 or 6 cars that could win any given race,
Right.
but those cars are special, and they are the pinnacle, and they are ridiculously fast, and people just don't. You have to go to one of those races and watch those cars go by. Because I've had people go, I went to a Formula E race. Is that like Formula One? I'm like, you've
Yeah. No.
obviously never been to a Formula One. Because those cars will frighten you. It's like someone that's
Oh,
never
yeah.
seen a top fuel dragster or a funny car launch.
Oh yeah, they'll get
from
the
50
shit
feet away.
scared out of them just
They
when the fucking
scare
thing
you to
turns
death.
on. Oh yeah.
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 And so that's, or watch not that we get to do this, but you watch an F-18 launch off a carrier deck,
Oh no,
or
that's insane.
it's like there's
The
a
thing
whole
is,
level of crazy.
I think also what's going on, Paul, is that we're another completely separate thing that really doesn't have to do with cars, but with culture, with people, and especially with young people right now, is just it's the conditioning, especially with cars. Like that's why the other day when I saw you posted the trailer for Ford versus Ferrari. That's going to be, you know what? I think it'll probably be. I think I posted on your comment. I just put a comment real quick, and I had just said this is probably going to be probably the best, most realistic racing movie we've had. In either it's going to be the best or will be one of the best of today's movies that are coming out as far as when it comes down to cars. Because my problem, and kind of the same thing, I mean, not that it's comparable, but with F1, I'm sure I think you could maybe side with me on this, is Hollywood has become it's just nothing else to call it than just CGI shit. It's just every single thing you can think of in every single different type of movie today. It's 90% CGI. And let me tell you, I watched what was it on today's Saturday night, dude. I put on Terminator 2. Fucking A, that movie had the best CGI that today makes it. It made the CGI from today look like it should be the other way around. This is a movie that was made in the 90s, and when you watch the T1000 transforming and going through the bars, you can't even believe your eyes that if this was real, this is exactly what it would look like. And that whole thing is something that really bothers me, because I mean, finally we had, I don't even know who the producer of the movie and who thought up the movie up, but let me tell you, talk about a great story, realistic story, racing epic story that needed to be put into a film. And I don't know, past 30 years. I mean, it should have been made already like 10 times over, but I'm glad that it hasn't. And I think it's going to be a great movie, and I think they have the right feel. There was at the end of the trailer, there was that part where the car kind of flipped over. It was a little bit exaggerated, but obviously you can't do it as slow as you want to, because then it just wouldn't look as good on the silver screen, which that's another thing about.
Yep. And you're again, it's another balancing act of balancing what would be commercially viable, and Steve McQueen went through this, and that's why he ended up producing Le Mans by himself, is that they wanted much more of a love interest, and they wanted it all to be fake. And this is 1970, so it's not like this is a new problem, right? And so it's always been an issue. And of course, as a society, we've changed considerably, not necessarily for the better, especially as where comes for an understanding of people that that want to go and take risk doing things. You got, on the one hand, you've got extreme sports, and that's really cool, but it's not, people don't really understand. They're more into, and I see this from a driver training perspective, like people think they're good drivers already when I get them. Right. And they're like, "Oh, I'm a really great driver." And what they're basing that on is like how they drive relative to the people that drive around them.
Exactly.
And so,
which is not a good example.
Yeah, whether they're, and maybe like comparison. in a best case scenario, they're in a league at an indoor go-kart track. Right. But it's not even usually at that level. Usually it's just based on their road driving. Right. And so they come to a racetrack thinking they're good race car drivers already.
Yeah. And that's a bad mentality to have.
And they said if you ask an average, if you do a poll of American drivers, you say a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you as a driver? That the average answer in America is an 8.
Yeah, they're smoking
if you
crack.
ask the same question in Germany or England or France, the average answer will be a 3 or a 4.
Exactly, because they know that they're not shit compared to anything. They wouldn't even get close to a racing car.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's even to be an amateur race car driver is a huge level above what the average road driver is. And then to go to be a professional driver, and this is something I talk about very extensively in my book, because my book's really about the difference between good and great. I think there have been a lot of racing books that have been written to try and get people to be good, to be a good amateur driver. And in reading all those books, as I have of a student of the sport, something that's been a part of my life for my whole life, that I realized no one had ever written about the last second,
which is the most important.
And that takes, you can become a good amateur driver relatively quickly, but that last second, most people never achieve. If you think about the percentage of drivers that go from being, let's say, a road driver to a indoor go-karter to an autocrosser to a track J junkie to an SCCA racer to an SCCA pro racer to a top flight paid IMSA racer, all the way up to a Lewis Hamilton,
right?
Max Verstappen, Vettel, top of the line, as far as a Formula One driver. You're going up, you'd look at that like the shape of a pyramid, and how pointy it gets at the top, how few people reach that level. And trust me, they're surrounded by such a high level of engineering that what they do from a driver's perspective is beyond what I can do as a driver, because I don't have that support around me that could take me to that level. So that's another premise in my book, by the way, is that anyone could be a great driver, given anybody has the potential within them to reach that level. It's so few tick all the boxes and then have the insane determination to put themselves in that position eventually at some point in their life.
So I think those are two really interesting things you had said, and something I'm glad you brought up, because I was going to bring it up and you kind of beat me to it. But so I have to read your book. That's first of all, because without
everybody listening to this, everybody. I'm trying to hypnotize everyone. I'm going to speak very slowly. You're going to go to Amazon.com and you're going to buy Optimum Drive. It's actually free as an audiobook if so that's awesome. That's kind of cool. But I totally recommend the book because it's a bit more accurate than the audiobook.
Well, so I wanted to break so many things down, man, and I'm trying to keep my shit together as far as wanting to do this work.
Sorry.
What's that?
I said I talk a lot. Sorry.
Oh, no. Are you kidding? This is why I wanted to have this podcast with you, man. You're not a person that just goes, yeah, so this does this and that does that, and then I'm done. No. You go into full explanation, which I think is awesome, man. So one of the things that I wanted to also bring up was, you're welcome. So about what you said. So when you said that, and I heard you talking about it in the other podcast, and I said, I got to ask him about that, because that's something that I'll tell you this, man. Unfortunately, I have not been able to go full-blown professional, only because it's what the other person had mentioned in the other podcast is money. I think today that's one of the
money.
Well,
it's not.
I put it this way. So if I wasn't limited to the restriction of money right now, then I don't think I'd be stuck where I am right now, not being able to go out of the racetrack every single day of my life to try to get to that point.
You could be on a racetrack every single day of your life if you wanted to.
Okay, so we have to work out that equation, because let me tell you, I've been trying to find out how to do it, and it's okay. Well, so the fact that you say that every person can become that ultimate, not even that ultimate. Forget about Formula One. Forget about Formula. That's just, like you said, just at least becoming a pro driver at ANSA, at any type of competing group right now that is out there that is competing professionally at a professional level. My goal was always, my goal was to do this. Formula One, forget about that. If you're, in my opinion, if you're not born into that special group of people, and I'm not talking about as far as ability.
That's not true either, but keep going.
Okay. Well, that's what.
None of that is true. Everything you're about to say and have been saying are excuses.
Excuses. Okay. So
everything.
I really hope it's
no matter no matter how cleverly you conjure this thing up, and how much time you spend and work on it, and how substantial you think your reasoning is, it is only an excuse.
Well, so check this out. I'm not trying to make an excuse. For sure, without a doubt. What I'm trying to say.
I can hardly wait to hear what you're going to say next after that.
So what I'm trying to say is this. This is what I'm saying. Is that as far as Formula One, let's just say on an age restriction, I'm 35 years old. Now, I'm not saying I can't do it. Put me in a Formula One. If you put me, listen, we'll go to the Super America track at Texas. They're renting out the Lotus right now for $10,000. Let's go ahead and do it. I'm ready. I'm fucking ready to go, man. But the issue is. What's that?
Buy a seat in a Williams, and you could do it if you were exceptionally good enough that someone would buy that seat. Because trust me, Lance Stroll has his seat for money.
Right, but you have to show that you have to have your racing resume.
Yeah, that's what you'd have to go earn. That's what you'd have to go earn. But I'm just saying, it's possible. It's incredibly unlikely at 35 or me at 54. It's incredibly unlikely that I would be racing a Formula One. No, I can physically do it. No problem at all.
Oh, really? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no physical. I would have to train, and I'd have to train harder than I would when I was younger. But I'm fitter right now than I was when I was 18.
Right. Yeah, but you have to just like, for example, your neck. Like your neck has to be. You have to do this crazy neck, right? Oh, for sure. Yeah. You can work up to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So so using that as the example, you can work up to everything that would make you great enough to drive a Formula One car.
Right. But I think, but the thing that you made, the main point that you mentioned in your book, and you were talking to the other podcast, and that's something that really drew my attention when I heard it. I was like, what? How could he be saying this? I don't, and look, your opinion is obviously a lot more valid than mine, because look where you,
Thank you.
But what I'm saying is this, and this is something I have felt, and you talked about that. That was the major thing, feeling. So that's where I think there's a difference. And, that whole thing that you brought up, or what I think a lot of people that have gone racing and the people that I think have it. So there has been some research now into people that have what's called the adrenaline gene, or the extreme sports gene, whatever you want to call it. There are some people on this earth that, through their families, obviously, and I'm a firm believer in genetics. I love genetics because it really could sometimes explain a lot of obviously of your attributes and your abilities and special things that certain people can do. Now, I get what you're saying, that pretty much anybody in the world. So I'm a drummer. I've been drumming since I was 14 years old. And I could probably teach almost everybody that if you put me in front of 100 people with enough time, they could probably get their what's called their independence, where all their appendages are completely individual from their whole body, like their right hand.
Got to do that driving, by the way.
What's that? You got to do that driving, exactly. Right. So that's one of the right. But what I'm saying is that with drumming, I think, and it's funny because this is something I learned recently, which I think is something maybe you have never thought of, and I didn't think of it, and this is something you'll find really cool. So check this out. So most human beings, actually all human beings, obviously, that are born naturally, they all have this instinct to drum on certain things. And believe it or not, let me ask you, see if you can come up with the answer. Where do you think that instinctual, like drumming, wanting to tap on certain things, and it depends on different persons from person to person, where some people will, tap on stuff when they get nervous. Some of them will just do it when they're bored. Where do you think that comes from?
I kind of agree. Like it's more of like almost like a tick. Like you kind of tap your leg from anxiety.
Right.
In a lot of cases, if you are nervous, you kind of do that. Like it's funny. Like my son does it a lot. Like I sit next to him at a movie, and it's like comes to a tense scene in the movie, and all of a sudden the seat's vibrating. Because he's like, yeah. And I my wife catches me doing that occasionally too. So I think it's kind of built into us, and so to me,
where do you think it comes from? So I don't want to stop you.
So here it is. Like so I think of like a cat getting ready to pounce, or a lion. But they do that they do that little wiggle before they
Right.
pounce to set their muscles before they launch. So you're sort of it's like a sprinter in the blocks. They
Right.
move their feet back and forth like right before the launch. So it's kind of like this ready, set, go instinct that we
Right.
have, where we're sort of trying to time out. If you think about like you're running, just running because that's rhythmic, right? And
Right.
you want to jump something running. Like think of the hurdles as being a great example.
Right.
There's a certain cadence to jumping hurdles. They take however many strides and then they leap, and they take however
Right.
many strides and then they leap. So
Right.
so I think that's just built into our physiology
Right.
of us whenever we're active, whenever we're moving. Everything we do has a certain rhythm to it.
Right. Well, that's a very scientifically a good portion of what you said is true. But check this out. So now I'm gonna try to blow your mind with something.
All right.
All of us were born and are in our mom's womb for 9 months. And what do you think we constantly hear inside?
The heartbeat.
Yes, sir. So the heartbeat, the reason that we have this instinctual beating thing in us is because it comes from 9 months of constantly hearing the heartbeat. So trying to separate this from the driving stuff that we were just talking about, racing and everything. So as far as this drumming thing, yes, I think, again, I'm not the best drummer in the world, but I've been drumming for a long time and I've learned a lot of stuff, but I'm still learning. Every single day I learn little things. Like just
Good
recently.
attitude.
Yeah. Just recently I got myself, finally, it's fucking 20 million years later, I got myself a set of double bass pedals, and I was able to really just pick it all by myself and trying to get some technique. And just slowly, within 2-3 months, I picked it up, and now I can do stuff that in the beginning, when I first started, even 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, I couldn't do. And what I started doing was when I'm driving with my left foot, because usually your right foot is what you start with, obviously, with most drummers, and then your left foot is the one that gets left, just pressing the pedal on the hi-hat, but no bass pedal. So what you'll do is that if you do some exercises in the car, which I've been doing lately, I worked those muscles to finally get them to, because at first they really were hurting every time I tried to do these exercises and these repetitions. Once I got the muscle memory into them and they finally started getting used to that movement, it stopped hurting. So I think some of that is what you're saying, that pretty much anybody in the world could be taught to be the fastest they can at a race car. But this is where I think there's some differences.
No. I could say they could be the fastest person in the world in a race car, not just as fast as they can.
But Aaron said,
anyone has the potential to be
out.
the best driver. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so my question to you is this, because I've had a lot of experience, like doing a lot of fast driving, not to your extent, obviously, but I've been on racetracks. I've done a lot of really crazy stuff on street, as far as street racing. I know you probably think that's ridiculously stupid, but trust me, we didn't go out there and just
do it, kids.
Exactly. So we didn't just go out there in the middle of US 1 and start doing 100-mile-per-hour drifts in the middle of traffic at 3 o'clock in the day in massive traffic. Me and my crew, we would go out.
You had to work up to that.
Yeah, exactly. So what we would do is we go out to Okeechobee, a famous road here in Florida, and it's a huge road. There's nobody really on there at 12 o'clock in the night. We'd go out there with huge groups of people. We'd go out there, believe it or not, with state troopers and with some local cops that were like diehard drag racers, diehard guys that have been drag racing their whole lives, that didn't think that, oh yeah, you're all criminals and you're fucking terrorists, let's throw you in jail. And so we did it in a very, we had guys with walkie-talkies on either end side of the road, and we had picked that up almost half a mile, sometimes a mile, of these spotters that would be out there letting us know if there was cars coming, if there was traffic, this, that, whatever. We tried to do it as safe as you can in a non-controlled environment. And it was funny because I'll tell you this. So my experience, the first day I set foot on a racetrack, I had my friend's C6E06. Car had 640 horsepower. He had it set up with, what did he do with the suspension? He had gone with, obviously, coilovers. I think it was KW coilovers. And then he did the, I'm forgetting. There's a shock system that uses oil, and it's basically out of a race car. I just forgot the brand right now. I'm just trying to think of the brand it was. But it was this amazing brand that, obviously, it gives you the ability of trying to make that car semi into a race car, because it's not like, with leaf suspension you can go that crazy. That was one of the reasons why we would decided to take all that shit out, throw it out, finally do coilovers. So car had about 640 to the wheels. He had taken the car to K-Tech. Huge mistake, by the way. I don't know if you've ever had experience with K-Tech, but they built him an engine that lasted him like 100 hours of racing. It was ridiculous. But
that sounds like a good race engine. They built him a racing engine.
Yeah, well, but right, but
that's a good amount of hours to get out of a race engine.
Well, true, but the thing was that they didn't tell him that. They said this is a fully built engine. You can just go,
I bet that's what he asked for. They gave him exactly what he asked for.
Well, let me tell you, he definitely paid for it, man. He definitely paid for it. He paid almost like $15,000+. But anyway, so and it was the funniest thing, man. The first thing that I see, the first visual, thing that my eyes are telling my brain right before going into the racetrack was a crash. This was a 997 GT3. I have pictures of it. It's hilarious. Silver 997, of a guy that obviously got in thinks, oh, I have a GT3. Oh, I'm a race car driver now. I'm magically now a race car driver because I have a car that's semi good on the track. So I got to be a race car driver. The guy made a stupid mistake of, have you ever been down, Paul, just question, have you ever been down here to Homestead in Miami? Oh, you have? Okay, cool.
Yep.
So you know that there's that dip that to try to retrace?
Like turn 3, 4?
Yes, sir. So on that dip, instead of him being flat out and maybe letting off just a little bit, he didn't do that. He let off completely and then slammed on the brakes because he freaked out. So, and didn't countersteer enough, and by countersteering enough, I'm talking about maybe putting half a degree. I mean, nothing, but freaked him out, put himself into the wall. So this is the first thing I'm seeing. So get on the racetrack, and it was the weirdest thing, man. In the first time in my life, my brain is trying to compute. Okay, you got to watch out for cars. You got to watch out for cops. You got to watch out for other cars. You got to, you're in a non-controlled environment. And the first time in my life, my brain was going, oh, wait a minute, we're on a racetrack. All I have to do is worry about maybe some of the other cars that are on the racetrack and be able to beat all of them, and just aim for my apexes and make sure that I'm braking at the brake points where I'm supposed to be. That's it. That's all I got to do. It was hilarious. And I found it very easy coming from, again, a long life of street racing. So, and
that's why they don't want people racing on the streets and why you should race on a track. It's a controlled environment, and you can, there's not some random person backing out of a driveway or making a left in front of you, and it's your fault because you shouldn't be doing that on the road.
Oh, no, for sure. And I again, I mean, we were all young, we're all stupid, you know how that is. But so it was funny because, and it was easy. And it was funny because I was talking to, the first lap I went around, the instructor, I made him shit his pants. I mean, granted, the guy was about 60 years old, but he had plenty of lap time, time on the track at Homestead, and he himself had a C606. And man, I went in flat at turn 10, coming back around the rear side of the racetrack, where you come in, you can come in pretty hot if you nail the angle correctly. I was doing 140, 150 miles per hour, and man, he didn't say anything until I got through it. But right after I got through it, he was shitting his pants. He's like, I didn't know that this car could do that. So, I've always tried to, it's not even me trying to push myself. It's just that there's a certain, and I want to say instinct, where at those speeds, I tend not to worry about what's going on except for what I need to worry about. And I'm not even worrying about it. It's just like a subconscious thing. Something that you had mentioned, again, in the other podcast that I had listened to. So I don't think everybody can do that, Paul. I don't think, and as far as speed, when you throw speed in the factor,
and
you have to enjoy it, man. You really think so?
Anyone can do it.
Okay.
Yep, I know. Like I said, 30 years. Okay, whether they can do it as quickly, like learn it as fast as you did it, that's the question. But can they do it? Yeah. Here's you got two different timelines at work here. First of which is intelligence. Okay, right. Intelligence gains you speed, not speed on the track, but speed in learning things.
Right.
All right, and then you factor that against determination. Okay, so if you're looking at someone that is very intelligent, but not very determined, they don't tend to learn a lot of things, even though
Right.
they're super smart. That's why intelligence isn't the same as wisdom,
Right.
right? Or experience.
Right. Yeah, they're two
So,
different things.
so two different things. So all you're looking at, like when I'm training people, people are like, can I be a good driver? Can I be a great driver? Yeah, absolutely. It depends how determined you are.
Right.
And then if you're intelligent too, then that really helps because that's gonna get you there faster. But what happens with almost everyone is that they run out of determination, not potential.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh
They
yeah,
run out of
perfect sense.
determination. Now,
Yeah,
a lot of
there's
people
just
would say
people.
I ran out of money.
Right.
I ran out of money. No, you ran out of determination. You didn't run out of money because I know of stories. There's stories of people that could have stopped then because they ran out of money, but they went and found more, right?
Yeah.
Because why? Because they were determined.
Determination. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
it. So how you felt in that corner, fantastic. You impressed a driving instructor, awesome.
Yeah. Not a big deal.
How far is that up the scale of great driving?
Right.
We'll never know until you kind of try and reach your potential, and then we'll know
Right.
how good you can actually be. But that sounds like a good day and a good first step, right?
Right.
And you're on the path. But anyone, and,
Well,
and again, I've seen so many people, right? I'm talking about like in the thousands I've coached now,
Right.
thousands of people, putting them through the same process and watching them run out of determination at some point or not. And then seeing them being pro drivers today and still coaching them today and like that kind of wink or handshake when I see him, and I'm just like, man, I'm really proud of you. And you realize what it is. And some of them, again, not super fast learners, but just really, really determined. They never. And when I say determined, it's like, are you willing to sleep in your car and not own anything?
Yeah.
And your car is a $500 car and you drive it to racetracks. I've got friends, close friends, that's their story when they were kids. They were that determined to become a professional driver.
Right. No,
So,
and
to the point of homelessness, and they had no personal money, zero, not a dollar, right? They earned their way all the way to the top of professional racing. And again, was there anything exceptional about them physically? Like, did they have really fast reflexes? Did they have really good eyesight? No, and no.
Right.
They had this unwavering determination. And I when I say they, I didn't. I realize that now at my age that's why I never made it to Formula One. I just didn't want it bad enough. I was willing to make excuses.
But wouldn't you say, because I've tried to study most of this, the whole Formula One, hey, you got to kind of not be born into it.
About to tell me excuses, aren't you?
No.
See,
I'm asking a question. I'm asking Paul a question. So, what I'm asking is that even not personal friends, obviously. I don't really know anybody that drives a Formula One car, but I know a couple people, F3 drivers. I know actually, it's a really crazy story. So I met a member of the royal family from Saudi Arabia walking my dogs at a dog park here in Miami.
There's thousands and thousands of princes in Saudi Arabia. So
exactly.
Not super rare, but yeah.
Right. But I'm saying he was one of them, and him and his brother are F3 drivers, this, that, whatever. Obviously I'm not trying to make him the example. I'm saying that, for example, like when I was really young and we would go to, like, it was over here in Miami, it was called Malibu Grand Prix. They had like the kid go-karts.
I had a club car license at Malibu Grand Prix.
Oh shit, no way. I still have that's awesome. Okay, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, dude, Paul, I was hitting apexes and looking in my rear, looking back always to see how far I was from the people behind me before I knew what an apex was. So, and back to what we were talking about, something that I wanted to ask you. You said specifically that there are certain people, you put them in a car, they know exactly, feeling-wise, what the angle is of how much rotation they have to put in the steering wheel to get out of a spin, or when they're starting, when the car's starting to drift out.
They don't like instinctively know that. They learn that.
That's true. They learned it, but you tell me how I did that when I was a kid and didn't understand
you learned
anything.
it. You learned it. You don't need to have names for things. I was doing that
Right.
on a bicycle, on a pair of skis when I was a child.
Right.
I didn't have any of that named. I was doing it on a skateboard. You ever ride skateboards as a kid and you get it right to the point where it's sliding?
Correct.
Because they don't have a lot of grip, skateboards, and then you just slide them and you're like, oh, that's kind of fun to slide the skateboard.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, oh, that could actually turn into a trick.
Yeah.
And on a bicycle, I raced BMX as a kid. It's like any of that stuff. That's where you're.
That's experience.
That's where you're learning. No one's born with any of that.
It's really funny. It's funny. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, Paul. It's funny that you're saying this. Not funny in a funny way. I'm saying it's funny because I got a good friend of mine. He actually just got here from Brazil. I'm sure you know what CRG, karting CRG, the company.
Yep.
Okay. So he had a huge CRG dealership in Brazil for almost 7 years, and he had to close it down. But he's here now. And me and him have gotten into this discussion many times before about this whole feel and this whole, this instinct, this racing. And he goes along exactly what you say. And I would get pretty heated with the conversation because, he told me, listen, he says, it's experience. Exactly what you're telling me. It's if you do it enough times, you'll learn it well enough where you have that amount of experience, then you can master it. And I totally agree with what he says, but what I don't agree, Paul, is that try to get someone, let's say just completely, let's been in a horrific car accident and doesn't want to go above 20 miles per hour. I'm just trying to bring out examples.
It's just time. It's
right,
time. All you're ever going to do, like we could have this conversation for hours and hours, but the only thing that's going to vary, again, I gave you the factors already, right? Right. It's intelligence and determination.
Yeah.
So for them, it's determination, right?
Right.
Determination that's going to get them through that bad car crash. I've done that, dude. I've done it. Been there with people that have had bad car crashes. Right. They just have to want it bad enough. It's literally all in your head.
Yeah, like it is. Being
the next Ayrton Senna is in your head. It's in my head. Right. It's in everyone's head.
Well, that was the other thing.
He just had focus, intelligence, and determination to become what he became. Same with Michael Schumacher. Say, you think of Lewis Hamilton. He started he and his dad had no money. Right. They were from a poor neighborhood, and they just went go-karting.
Right.
And
a lot like Ayrton Senna.
Oh, yeah. Well, Ayrton, there was a little bit more money with Ayrton.
With Ayrton,
still the same kind of thing. But there's plenty of those stories, and everyone they're like, oh, Lewis Hamilton. Well, he introduced himself to Ron Dennis, when he was 10 years old and told Ron he wanted to race in a Formula One car. Remember the other side of this. He had to be getting the results racing. He had to be winning to create the opportunity. Right. So that's the determination. It's not like, oh, I'm so determined that I'm going to go ask Ron Dennis of McLaren if I can drive one of his Formula One cars.
Right.
Ron laughed at Lewis like he would laughed at anyone else, but then he went and looked at Lewis's results and he kind of raised an eyebrow and went, this kid's really good. And he's got that attitude. Right. And Lewis, he had to learn all that. He had to learn every bit of it.
Right. Paul, let me ask you this. What do you think of Ayrton Senna, the fact that, and me having a lot of friends from Brazil, this is a famous story that I grew up around, which was when it rained or it started to rain or it drizzled, people at home supposedly would shut their TVs off because they knew that he would win. Now, do you think, well, no, I'm answering my own question, but I'm going to ask you. So you're saying that, do you think he purposely maybe practiced in the rain? I mean, I know he would walk, like he would walk the racetrack. Like he knew every millimeter.
That's a professional driver. That's
correct.
A professional driver,
any condition.
Realizes these are the conditions that I could race under. I've used the example of I've had really bad exhaust leaks occur while I'm racing, or failures of exhaust systems where your foot starts actually burning while you're racing. You got an hour left in the car, or the exhaust is piping CO2, emissions into the car. And you're a racing driver, and you just keep going right to your physical limit. It's just part of the deal. um, inside a race car can be 150 degrees for 2 hours.
For sure.
And most people pass out. You're conditioned. You talked about the neck exercises.
Right.
You know, all these are all just part of it. And again, what's the word that keeps bubbling back up? Determination.
Determination. Yeah.
That's professionalism. It's like, are you ready to race under all these conditions? And so there's a lot of guys in Formula One, obviously, that weren't as determined as Ayrton Senna. And that's why he was so good. Not because it was some divine gift. He worked hard. He put himself in the right cars. He was very shrewd. Right. He stayed after all the other drivers went home or went out partying. He was with the team, talking to them about the settings and the setup of his car. He put in extra time every single day to be as great as he was. Right. No one wants to hear that story because that means, hard work. That you'd rather hear that you couldn't be Ayrton. That's a much more satisfying result because then you don't have to feel disappointed in yourself not being as determined. Once you say everyone has the potential, it's depressing to people. But I'm saying it in a way to hopefully motivate people.
I think it's liberating. I think what you're doing to me, listening to you say what you're saying, it's like fuck. Because I can tell you
all in your head.
Right. I mean, I can tell you my childhood story and all that stuff. And my first word was car, ball. Before mom and dad, it was car. I mean, I know it's stupid. Oh, how about this? When I was 3 years old, check this out. So picture your son. Your son, how old was your son?
My son now's 22.
But... 22. Okay.
Yeah.
So a little bit ago, when he was 3 years old, imagine when we pulled up to the airport. My grandma, we were going back to Venezuela because my grandma used to live in Venezuela in Caracas. She had 3 very prominent antique stores, and she was very into art and all that stuff. And we were going back. We were in Miami, and this is an 88, 87 Cadillac. It was 2 years right before Cadillac and most of the manufacturers finally put in the safety feature that you needed to press the brake to engage the lever and to drive.
Yeah,
it was an 88 Cadillac or 87 Cadillac, a DeVille. And they both get out to take the luggage out of the car. And what do? I get up, I scoot on over, and I literally put that fucker into drive. And the car starts rolling right into it was going towards the traffic lane because we had parked on the side of the road to get the luggage out. And, my mom, my grandma, both freaking out. Instead of trying to jump into the car and put the car into park, they're trying to pull the car back. So that's not going to do anything. So, this is at 3 years old. My mom told me that some service, I think it was a guy from the military, he just saw what was going on, jumped right in, put it in park, and before she had a chance to say thank you, the guy was gone. But, and I'm not trying to make that like, oh yeah, I should have become a race car driver because of that. No, my whole life has been trying to figure out ways, and look what you're talking about. If you're talking about being persistent and determined, trust me, I'm doing my best. No, you're not.
You're not. I'll just stop you and say you're not because you didn't do what Lewis Hamilton did. You didn't go karting.
I know. I wanted to.
So again, that's. I'm sorry for being kind of blunt, but I just.
No, it's okay.
These are, like I said, everything you're going to say from this point in the conversation onwards is just going to be excuses. Remember I said that, right? About 15 minutes ago.
Correct.
And that's all you're doing right now because I have people ask me all the time. I'm like, what kind of car do you drive? The guy's like, I got an M3. Mm-hmm. Sell it. Go buy yourself a CRG kart and race in the most popular class that is in your area that has a spec tire on it, right? Or buy any brand of competitive car. It doesn't have to be a CRG, but you get the point, right?
Yeah, just get yourself in a car and go racing.
Beat everyone in that class.
Right.
If you do that, if you beat everyone in that competitive class in your region, you will get sponsors. And when you do that, you'll get to go race in the next one. And pretty soon, if you keep doing that, this is what Lewis Hamilton did, right? Because that's all he did. He didn't go out to see movies. He didn't hang out. He raced. That was his life. And now he reaps the rewards of that determination. Of course. Okay?
So what about Le Mans? Same thing?
What's that?
If I wanted to try to make it to Le Mans, it's the same thing.
Absolutely. Start right now. Go kart racing. Win, beat everybody. And this is if that's your budget. It's like don't go race Spec Miata. That's more money, right?
Yeah.
It's not a lot more, by the way, because karting has gotten expensive. But again, if you start at whatever, you start at a spec class with a fixed tire and a fixed engine.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Where the engine has to last. So your yearly budget is maybe going to be $20,000 to run this thing, right? And you win that class, the end of that year, you got sponsors to go to the next class, and it begins.
Okay.
And pretty
All right,
soon you're
well,
winning
nice.
the super nats, and you win the super
Right.
nats, and you get sponsorship in the super nats and the shifter kart class from some manufacturer that happens to be sponsoring that year. Think of
Right.
Mazda's Road to Indy, right?
Right.
And Joseph Newgarden and Spencer Pigot, guys racing Indy cars right now. There's a bunch of them that came all the way up through racing Road to Indy with Mazda sponsorship every step of the way into IndyCar. You know, so
That's
don't
possible. Totally
it,
possible.
it's completely possible. It goes back. It's not talent. It's determination.
Okay.
Right? Determination. And intelligence is going to get you speed as far as how fast you learn things. But even if you're not that smart, learning how to drive a car, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I figured out how to drive a car pretty well over time.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and so that's all, the only factors in play. Everything else is simply excuses.
Right.
You're like, I'm willing to give up your girlfriend. You're willing to give up this. You're willing to give up that. You're willing to give up that. If the answer is, well, no, then sorry, you're not going to make it. Yeah. But don't think you don't have the potential. You're just not willing to make the sacrifices and dedicate your life to this thing.
Right.
Because that's what it is. It's nothing short. And you're like, I thought about cars since Step 3. Yeah, great, awesome. But obviously you went off and you did other things, which were all fun things, but they all stopped you from doing what you actually say you wanted to do.
Right.
That's it. And that's, by the way, that's true of me as well. I could have gone a lot further in motorsports. I'm happy with what I did, but I'm short of what I could have done. And that's because...
Is that how you feel? Is that how you feel? You feel that you...
I'm full of regret. Full of regret. Again, it turned out pretty well for me, but I could have been in F1. I realize that now because all these things I'm telling you, it took me 30 years of coaching to understand human beings.
Right.
I'm
not going against...
I was there making excuses with everybody else.
No.
Right?
I'm not going against what you're saying, and I agree with you. I totally agree with what you're saying, and 30 years of, like what you said, of teaching human beings certain things, you tend to get certain things out of all those 30 years. So I totally understand how you were able to come to this point where you said, hey, it really, and like you said, if you have to give up everything, you have to be driving your $500 car, sleeping outside the racetrack to become what you want to become. That's the determination it takes.
That's it.
Totally agree with you. I mean, that's for anything.
You're about to say but, so say but.
Oh, no, but I'm saying same thing. Like same thing if you wanted to be a bit like no, you know who says the same thing? Most of today's billionaires. Bill Gates.
You want a simple example? Simple example is think of any Olympic athlete.
Oh, for sure, those guys are.
That's like a low-hanging fruit, like something everyone knows, even as a child, is that Michael Phelps, all he has done his whole life is swam.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's all he's done. I mean, I have a friend, a colleague that I work with that made it into the collegiate level of swimming. And he talked about, they got up at 4 a.m. every morning, 7 days a week.
Every day.
4 a.m, swam for 5 hours, went to school. After school, went back to the pool.
You got to make it your life. You got to make it your life.
7 days a week. 7 days a week. So the thing is like people are in racing. It's like, I can't afford it. It's like, do you have the mindset and the determination of an Olympic athlete? And they're like, what does that have to do with it? I just need a lot of money to go racing. It's like, oh, that is a way. You can be a Lance Stroll and buy your way into Formula One. You could do that, but you also, if you're claiming if you don't have that money, that is you are not out of Formula One. There's another way, and it happens to be we put out hundreds and hundreds of Olympic athletes every year in this country. And what I'm simply saying is you need to have the determination of an Olympic athlete to become a professional driver.
Right.
But everyone wants to push back and go, no, it's just about money because racing's about money. Skiing's not about money. Field hockey's not about money.
Right.
They're saying that's an amateur sport, but that's still is
not at a professional level.
Yes, that is the best in the world. I think it's like, and again, think of any professional athlete in any of the stick and ball sports, right? It's the same thing. Those guys have been playing basketball or football their whole lives. If you saw the amount of hours they put in preparing, oh my God.
Michael Jordan.
And no one wants to hear that. because it's easy just to say I can't afford to be a professional driver, or I would have been. I'm also just ask my friends. I've got the quickest time this week at the indoor go-kart track. I could have been, and that feels pretty good. And I hate to be the dream crusher, but you
No,
could have been informed.
that would have been, yeah.
You had applied yourself like an Olympic athlete. You could have made it well beyond being the fastest guy at an indoor go-kart track.
Right.
And
Yeah, I think that my whole thing is that certain people, again, just certain people have that I mean it's strange because I haven't been it's a long story, but I had to sell this amazing M3 that I had, whatever, E36 97
to go-kart racing.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, for sure. So what I'm saying is that I haven't experienced a lot of adrenaline in my body like I used to, and it feels like it's had a change on me because that was another thing I wanted to talk to you about was adrenaline levels. I think that's a huge factor once you start, again, like what you said, when you're going out on the racetrack and you haven't been out for maybe a month or so, and you start getting into that rhythm of trying to get into that very fast lap time, and then now I'm doing my average. Now I got to move up forward. Now I got to keep on going faster. Let me try to cut here. Let me try to cut here. That's something that I think being comfortable at high speeds, like that's something I've always. It's never been a big deal for me, like me.
But for anybody, it's just conditioning.
Conditioning, correct.
Yep. It's think of the analogy of boot camp for speaking of D-Day, right?
The Green Berets.
Yeah, boot camp for anybody. Like they're if you have a draft, you're bringing in the cross cut of humanity. You're just taking every guy that passes the physical from the age of 18 to 24 or whatever the cutoff happens to be. Right. And you bring them into boot camp, and you've got this, just like you're saying, you've got people that are like, I'm comfortable with guns, they don't scare me. And then you got other people that are in that same first day in boot camp going,
oh shit!
Like I panic. Like I'm gonna panic. I can't fight. I'm this, skinny little kid, and this and that. And they got like 6 weeks to turn you into a soldier.
Right.
And at the end of that, they all go. Like like when it's a draft and it's a real war like World War II, it's like, you didn't wash out.
There was no choice.
You just went. You're cannon fodder if you didn't learn.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
And actually, I'll tell you something. The scared ones lived longer than the brave ones.
Yeah, because they're a little more caution.
They don't stick their head up the foxhole. The sergeant says, "Don't put your head up now. The Germans are shooting their machine guns over your head," and you go, "Oh, let me have a look.
Let me check." Yeah, that's not.
And that actually applies in racing, and I talk about that in Optimum Drive. I talk about the two different distinct personality types, and it sounds like you're part of the 10%, which are natural risk takers. Right. Natural risk takers actually end up winning less championships than people that are risk adverse. People that learn it step by step because they're scared of it end up learning it better than people that aren't naturally scared of it. You can see how someone would be reckless with a gun if they're not scared of guns and would risk hurting themselves. Where someone that's scared at guns learns to use a gun correctly and therefore is much safer with the gun. They could end up both being snipers, but in other words, they're both excellent shots, but the one that started out scared is much less likely to be hurt.
How does that work? Because that was a very... That one that's a hard one to swallow. That's a hard pill to swallow.
It's true. It's the same as the foxhole comparison. You're more likely and I'm part of the 10%, by the way. I had to learn to be intellectual about this, and I learned that by teaching people. I had to reconstruct something that felt very normal and natural to me, and realize I did learn it through my childhood because I had the opportunity to race bicycles and do all these things. I'd learned all these skills, and I was drawn to them because I had this risk-taking personality. But I realized that 90% of my clients didn't think like me, and I had to learn how to teach them as well. And then I realized that approach, I started looking on and go, whoa, Alain Prost, Ayrton Senna, like all these championship winners were not natural risk-takers. They're people that learned it. They learned it better. Schumacher, very intellectual.
Right.
They're actually the ones that end up being the best at it. The risk takers have to learn to calm down, because they end up getting killed.
Right, I think that it's a balance, because there has been, I think, a lot of the risk taker ones that have gone to, been on the podium. Much less, right, and less
They
percentage.
win races and they occasionally win championships, but they have to do it by learning to calm down,
Yeah,
to not just throw caution into the wind and
right,
take leaps of faith. Taking leaps of faith in anything that has lethal consequences, you'd have to agree, is a ridiculous way to approach something,
oh yeah,
right?
for
I just
sure.
hope this works out. So you could imagine back in the Derek
We
Bell, Jackie Stewart era,
right,
drivers were willing to take, or you had drivers that are more meticulous and checked the work of the mechanics and checked
right,
to make sure the cars were safe. They're the ones that lived
right,
longer or made it through that era or made it through World War II for that matter.
right. Well, but
So
wouldn't you say?
there's
Wouldn't you
there's the
say?
romanticized side of the risk takers. There's a romanticized side to this that the public thinks is really awesome. You know that these are people that are so carefree or so cocky or so confident that they're willing to throw themselves in. But you realize all those people do in the real world is die prematurely.
Right,
That you have to if it has risk, it deserves as much thought as you can give it to rationalize and take away the leap of faith and make it something you chip away at. And
right.
now you're doing something years later that people look at like, oh, you're a professional racing driver. You must be crazy. I hear that all the
That's
time.
so
And, and,
stupid.
and I am so
It's
far from crazy.
of course
Any
not. You're
of us
it's
are
a calculated
very,
risk.
it's it's not a risk anymore because it's so
Well, right,
calculated.
right,
You see what I mean?
exactly.
You
Right.
calculate the risk
It's
out of the equation.
right. It's
You
become
remove the risk.
extremely safe. Yeah, I mean, it's literally more
Yes,
dangerous to walk outside and just go
it
down the
is.
street.
I put more thought in any professional driver. They're less at risk racing than they are driving on the roads,
On the
getting
road.
hit by someone, by a
That's
drunk
right.
driver,
That's right.
right?
That's
So
right.
so going back to your point that you felt safe on the racetrack, it's an environment that's designed for racing,
Right.
and that's
Well,
why racing should only be done there because it's a
not
life or
it.
death kind of thing.
It wasn't that I felt safe, Paul. It was that I didn't have to worry about how do I say this? Basically, everybody else on the road. It wasn't the safety. I've never even on the road just because of, and that's something you just brought up right now. Confidence. So confidence most of the time comes from a lot of experience, like what you're talking about, right? Building up that confidence for many years of doing a lot of crazy stuff in cars, like I did. I mean, I had an '04, I had a 2004 '04 Mystic Cobra, the Cobra that had an independent rear from like 1930s when it hadn't even been invented yet. It was a piece of shit. I mean, it was just an independent rear because it literally didn't have a solid rear axle, but it wasn't a very advanced one. And
Yep, I remember. It had really short rear arms that had a lot of camber and toe changes
correct.
and all that stuff because
And
they
that thing
put
was
it in the same
snappy.
space.
Oh yeah,
Yep, not a
that
good
car
car.
was snappy as shit. Like
I've
you
driven them
need.
actually.
Okay, so I had that car for 7 years, cammed out, 550 horsepower. All it needed to make 800 was a Whipple or a Kennyville. I never got to that point. Anyways, and it was a convertible. No cage, no 4-point, no stiffening. It had stock suspension. I had it on the stock wheels, the 18s or 17s. I think it was 17s. So there was a one time we went out and I was gonna, and I've done a lot of filming for all the street racing stuff that we used to do. So I was literally just following a group of friends of mine. And there was this new kid that came in with a fucking the eggshell. I hate the Jetta, the Golf, it was the egg looking one. It looked like I hated that. That was like the worst Golf they ever made. Anyways, he had that Golf specifically. I think it was a 2006 or something like that, 2007. And this kid, imagine this. So we were going to film a flyby. We were purposely going to do like 150 plus mile per hour flyby. And it was, again, not like in the middle of the day, Okeechobee, on the freeway, super. I mean, it was only us on the freeway. And this kid, because he didn't know what he was doing, I'm doing 100 and I'd say 160, easy 160. And my friend on the left side, on the edge of on the side of the road, he was the one filming on the left, basically the lane before the fast lane. And this fucking kid, because he was so inexperienced, he was in front of my friend with a camera. This kid thought, because he had seen my lights coming up so fast, he thought I was going to run into them. He thought I was in their lane, which I wasn't. He pulled out in front of me. Now they're doing 50 miles per hour. I'm doing 160. So there's only one thing you can do in that example, and it's bank to the right a little bit and don't even think about touching the brake and hope things go pretty well. And the car got a little squirmy on me a little bit, got a little sideways, and my friend, the engineer, was there as well. And, I was able to get the car. Nothing happened. Nobody got hurt or anything like that. I mean, I told the kid to just fuck off and never, just never come close to us ever again. Don't show your face ever again. You gotta, and my friend was like, dude, I don't know how you did what you did, because mechanical engineering wise, that fucking car should have not been able to do what you did with it. So those type of things, I think from experience, obviously the more you do that, and again, not on public road, but the more you do that on a racetrack, the more you get used to how something is going to react. And like you said with the Vipers, because this is something you were talking about the other podcast, which I thought was awesome. Even the Gen 5 Viper, which is a awesome car. I've driven that car. My friend, the engineer, told me, he says he actually knows one of the engineers that helped set up the suspension on that car. And they're super snappy. They have grip, and all of a sudden they just lose it and it's over and that's it. You're in the wall, you're in the tree, or you're on the bank. And that's something that I think, like you said, through experience, it's something that the more you do it, the more you get used to being able to do that, not just in that car, but in other cars, correct?
Yeah, and I wouldn't describe the last Viper as snappy. I don't think it's snappy at all.
Right.
The criticism that I had, or have always had with that particular vehicle, is a lack of feel. So it doesn't communicate really well. So you don't get a lot of warning that the rear end is going to break loose or what have you. Right. Yeah, and so, but once it breaks loose, it's actually controllable. And I did a lot of stuff, drifting those cars and playing with those cars. And I've driven them since the RT10, the very first iteration.
The first one, yeah. Which that was a fucking truck.
Yeah,
that drove like a 1950s truck.
No, absolutely not. The engine sounded like it, but the car drove brilliantly. Actually, the suspension setup on the original RT10 was much more like we would set up a race car than the later versions, which were a little bit easier to drive than the RT10.
Wow.
So the RT10 was brilliant. Like, it actually, like, driving it, you were like, yeah, a road car really shouldn't be like this. It's actually set up like a decent race car would be, with less grip because of the tire. But anyway, so all of those things are, again, what you're describing is just learned stuff. And I be probably sitting in the passenger seat, through a maneuver like your engineer friend went through, I would be patting you on the back plenty for that as well, because sitting in the passenger seat, as you know, is a lot worse than actually being the driver, where it's just a quick little flick of the wrist and you're like, yeah, that wasn't so bad, So
it could have been,
but meanwhile, they're their hearts in their out of their chest. So so those are all things. And again, I can't stress enough, like as you said, it's like those are experiences. It's great to have experiences like that, but the problem for those experiences on the road is usually that is not the outcome, because there's variables that are out of control. And you could say simple things like
an oil slick, a little bit of oil,
gravel, whatever, or just pavement consistency, or changing pavement when you get on the shoulder. There's a million variables, and that's what racetracks are about, are eliminating variables so we can operate the vehicle at the limit without
worrying about those variables.
Again, being able, like I said, what we try and do is eliminate the risk from the equation as entirely as possible by getting rid of all those things. And a safe environment is job one in that situation. Then you want a safe car, and then you want a trained driver, and then you want all the other drivers to be trained, right? And you mix all those things together, and now we can operate at the very fine limits of racing. I know that doesn't sound very romantic or very risky. You're like, oh, I want them out there cheating death every 2 minutes, but it lets a human being, operate
very efficient
at a human being's limit. Like, and I say that, people are like, well, you think NASCAR drivers are better, or Formula One drivers? Like, they're all human beings. They're all operating at the human limit. You put enough of us together, we're going to find the limit of what a human being can do. Just like you throw everyone in the pool and Michael Phelps wins. He's the best human that day. You put a skier down a ski run, like you watch downhill skiers, those guys take a lot of risk.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they're doing 80, 90 miles an hour on skis down these little narrow runs. Holy cow. Like car racing is so much safer than downhill ski racing.
For sure.
I can't even begin to describe that. You're like, well, you're going 230 miles an hour and they're
Yeah,
going
but I have a full-blown cage that
they're on
surrounds
a mountain.
me.
They're on a mountain, you know, and yeah, so you look at
Well, look
those
at Schumacher. Look what happened to him. He a lifetime of Formula One, and he fucking look. I mean, for skiing,
that's more random because he wasn't even skiing that fast when it happened.
Right.
It was just.
Well, you don't have to.
But it does make the point, like you're saying, you're making a good point there of the controlled environment of the racetrack. Like it just, you know, you go out on the track and it's made for that. The car is built for that. You know, road cars aren't built to run on racetracks. Even good road cars can't drive on a racetrack like a race car. Like everyone's like, what's your favorite car? I just start listing race cars. Like, what about a Ferrari? I'm like, oh, I love Ferraris, but they're compared to a race car, they're not very impressive. You know, and there's even going all the way up to McLaren P1s and all those things. I love road cars, by the way, I do. But you go drive even a Formula Ford, you know, and that will impress you because it's 120 horsepower,
open wheel,
on slick tires. Yeah. That's a very visceral driving experience. Again, go get in a shifter car. That thing will run rings
beat
around
the shit out of you.
Any road car. Let's see you do 20 minutes in a shifter car, then we'll talk about how fit you are.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So all of these things are there's a lot of you know, there's a lot of urban legend, there's a lot of myth, there's a lot of romanticization.
It's a lot of bullshit.
It's a lot of bullshit. It's not. It is and it isn't. It's what you look at from the perspective of a fan versus what you look at from the perspective of someone that's in the industry or a driver. You know, I was just talking to a guy this morning that was he was a NASCAR mechanic, you know, and he did that for years. And a friend was asking him, was like, "Did you enjoy it?" He's like, "It was miserable." It's like, why? It's so much work. And everyone's like, "Oh, it'd be so cool to be a part of a NASCAR team." He's like, "We worked 24/7. We had no time off." And he's like, "Yeah, we flew in private jets everywhere." He goes, "But we landed on Wednesday. We left on Sunday. We worked at the shop the other days, almost 24 hours a day. Then we got on another plane. We went to another race. We didn't even know where we were. We didn't even know what racetrack we were at." And he's like, it was all just a blur, and it just wore you down, you know. Yeah. And it's like no one wants to hear that that's what racing is like, but that's what's racing like. You know, it's like me training. Like when I get off this call, I'm about to jump on a simulator for Pikes Peak because I got Pikes Peak coming up. I got that race in a couple weeks.
You told me about that.
I'm going to be on a simulator for hours and hours and hours. You know, am I having fun? No, I'm trying to save my butt on the mountain. I'm working.
Right.
It's work.
Right.
So you know, so all of those things are what racing is really about. And again, you know, if people think that you know, Usain Bolt is a fast sprinter because he's really tall and lanky. There's lots of tall and lanky people that don't run like him. He had to work at that, you know. And you know, in certain sports, in certain cases, a body type does give you an advantage. You know, in racing, being small gives you an advantage. Playing basketball, being really tall gives you an advantage.
Right.
But the fact remains that they're short, very successful basketball players, and there are very successful tall race car drivers as well. And those are the people you look at for determination.
Right.
They're like the ones who say, you shouldn't be doing this. And they're like, oh yeah, watch me.
Watch this. Yeah.
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 So
I totally agree.
Nothing is set in stone. There's no limit to what a human being can do relative to another human being. It really basically just comes down to desire.
Right.
End of story.
I think that's pretty awesome. I think that's very inspiring. That's for sure. Not that I, you know, am one of those people again that would have to get inspired, but because there's a lot of that going on as well today. And
well, you do because you're not in Formula One right now.
Yeah, I know.
See?
Well, I don't even. So Formula One, look, if I can, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to go
you should have been almost retiring now is what I'm saying. You should have been in F1 15, 20 years ago.
Yep. Yeah, I should be, or I should have been.
And I should have been too. That's the point. And I know people that have done it, and that's also the point. Because I realize that's the difference between them and me.
Right.
You know, like, oh, you know, whatever. I was like, I always beat them when I raced against them. It doesn't matter. They wanted it more than you, and they deserve to be where they're at because of that.
Right. Yeah, I think
you know
that's
part of the package. It's part of the deal. And again, they didn't start out with a bunch of money. They were just so impressive in and out of the car that they attracted people with money eventually, and that got them where they needed to go.
Right. Yeah, and that's
It's about
something.
being a quality human being,
Right.
you know,
And I think
and
that's
making use of your time and dedicating your life to something.
right. Yeah, and I think hearing it from you, I think it's not that it stings. I think it's more of a it's kind of like a I don't want to call it a wake up call. It's coming from you. The fact if anybody else would try telling me this, I don't care if they would have been. I'm not a professional race car driver because I've talked to a lot of them, but a lot of them have a lot of it's a lot of talk and a lot of you're saying it with a 120% certainty and truthfulness, and that's what I think is very valuable. I think it's a very valuable thing
And
to
I
hear.
think like just getting the message out to people, so we can just there's a certain level of excuse making that's okay to get you to sleep at night, so that you're not stressing yourself out so much that you have mental health issues. You know what I mean? Like you can be so hard on yourself. Like Paul told me to be determined, that you just basically eviscerate the world around you
Right.
with how aggressive you are, and you have to work within the structure of society to do this.
Right.
So there's a little bit of, you can lie to yourself a little bit, so you can make a little bit of an excuse, but realize that once that goes beyond just your own mental health and the sanity of the people around you, you're
Yeah, then
hurting the
that's a problem.
potential to get there.
Right.
Right? As soon as it goes beyond that, you're hurting your potential to do what you want to do. And so you've got to find that balance, like everything else. But let me be really clear. People that have this determination are not liked by a lot of people around them,
Right.
because it points a finger at them saying you're lazy.
Right. Oh, and that's really funny that you.
That's where this doesn't necessarily like that, and that's one of the sacrifices you have to make. You're going to shed a bunch of friends because they're going to be like, dude, what's your problem? All you ever talk about is cars. And you wanting to be a Formula One driver, and they have all been willing to make those sacrifices to fulfill that promise or that dream, to make it happen. That's just part of the process, man. I don't know. Did you see the drumming? I'm sure you've seen it. Whiplash.
Whiplash. What is
You have not seen Whiplash?
No. Who are we talking about here?
It's a movie about drumming.
Oh no, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
Oh my goodness!
I'm gonna have to watch it.
Pause the podcast right now. Watch the movie, then come back. No.
Okay. Wow, it's that good. I gotta watch it.
Watch that movie.
I haven't. You know what it is, Paul? I don't watch. Look, and I know this is gonna sound stupid. I barely have watched any new movie that has come out because of this whole But I guess I'll watch that. But I guess I'll watch that. Paul has just told me I gotta watch Whiplash, so I gotta watch. If I'm a drummer, I can't be a drummer if I don't see it.
My son's a musician. He plays guitar.
Okay, awesome.
And he's very good. I mean, he plays gigs and all that stuff, and he's just starting out, so he's not he's not an established pro or anything like that, but he's very good. And we watched that movie, and between his guitar, the lessons that he went through learning guitar, and he had a really good teacher for over 10 years. Okay. And me, from the driving perspective, we're watching Whiplash. By the way, everyone that's listening to this, go watch that movie if you hadn't seen it, because it shows you the insane level of ridiculous determination, where it goes to being like, again, you think in boot camp, they're abusing those people.
No,
they're abusing them to get them conditioned in 6 weeks to save their lives. Right. But that's the level of determination that we've been talking about here. That's what this is about. And it's like, if you're not willing to do that, then that's what you have to understand and realize you didn't not become a professional musician because you didn't know the right people, or it comes down to determination. And determination, again, is how much you're willing to sacrifice to see this happen. Are you willing to sacrifice everything, literally everything, to make it happen? Do what you want to love.
Yeah.
No, and that's what it is. And it's just that's what it is. And again, you want to think like the guy is skiing in the Olympics because he just naturally was born a great skier, or he's driving in Formula One because he has rich parents and he was naturally born a great driver. And you realize none of that is true.
But it helps a little bit. Wouldn't you say it helps a little bit to at least have that?
Helps. It doesn't help you become Aaron.
Right. It doesn't help you exactly. It doesn't help you.
That last second that I'm talking about is only going to come from people that are ridiculously determined.
That want it bad enough.
So your money will get you there. Your money could make you play in a pool of people that are good.
Right.
but it will never make you great.
Oh, no, no.
You
That's
cannot
for
buy
sure.
great. You're
Yeah,
going to have to earn it.
that's
And
for sure.
again, Whiplash is a great example of someone having to earn greatness
I'm
to
gonna
the
have to
point of
watch it.
psychological destruction.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of people have gone down that road, and look what happened with
Yeah.
Nikolai Tesla. I mean, with Tesla, he excuse me, Tesla, saying it wrong here. His story with the giant. He made a tower that would distribute electricity like we
Oh,
have
okay.
Wi-Fi today.
Tesla, like
Tesla.
Nikolai Tesla,
Yeah,
like the
Nikolai.
inventor.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. The inventor. So he had that issue, and he had J.P. Morgan Chase and guys from Wells Fargo, the founder of Wells Fargo. They destroyed him. They said, no, we're gonna charge for this. He says, no, I want to give this. This is my gift to the world. I want to be able to have the world be free of needing electricity. And I mean, I'm sure you've heard that or know about that story.
Yeah. There are all the stories about Bell, and Edison and all that stuff. So, but it is that there is a fine line, because what we're talking about. Remember, I brought up like this can cause mental health issues, right? So there is that fine line that they talk about between genius and insanity,
Right.
and all those things are really really true. You look at painters and artists of all types. And by the way, driving a car, just like drumming, is an art form.
Right.
Taken to that level, that last second, it transitions from being just a task into art. And you can say the same thing about someone woodworking with chisels,
Right.
A sculptor, and any of those things. What we're talking about is art here. An Olympic athlete, Michael Phelps, the way he swims, it's art.
Oh yeah.
The efficiency is his swimming, right? So the downhill skier, the efficiency of his ability to carve a turn is art. You're taking it to that level where it becomes sublime, and it becomes such diminishing return that they're willing to go down, because they're one of the 5 or 6 people on the planet that can even feel the diminishing return.
Right.
They
can feel the difference between
one of 5
not
of
doing
the
it correctly
artists.
or doing it
That's
correctly.
right. One of the 5 artists with a paintbrush that have a stroke that can actually feel the difference in that stroke and how it lays the paint out slightly differently on the canvas that creates art. Like that's the stuff. And again, general public, not necessarily that interested in that level of determination.
No.
And again, that's where the excuse making starts. You're like, yeah, I'm pretty fast at the indoor go-kart track, to use my old example, but I couldn't make it in Formula One because, I don't have rich parents.
Well,
correct. I mean,
that's
basically describes it. Like I coulda, shoulda, woulda,
but
and like I said, anything you're going to say from now on is just excuses, right? Because it can be, and it's not like, oh, I'm scared or I had a bad car crash. Like it's just going to take you time to get over that, but you could get over it. We all have the capability of rewiring everything.
It's the mental capacity.
Again, the one real advantage is if you're really intelligent. Like I said, I'm not. I think I'm just moderately intelligent, like average. So it takes me longer. I've seen people learn things a lot faster than me. And I look at them going, wow, and I'm going to have to spend days more doing this task to get as good as you. Right. But the cool thing about that, and you may have heard me mention this before, and it's in my book, is that, and that's why these people end up winning championships, is the determination to outdo the people that learn quickly. Right. That having that little bit of extra determination takes you further, and usually you will eventually beat that person. Right. When it comes easy to you, when it seems to come easy, you don't try very hard. It's just a natural balance of a human being. When it's hard for you, you naturally try harder.
Yeah, you want to try the best to finally get.
And you ingrain determination into part of your process of becoming good at things. When other people just do it on, like, it's just easy for me, and then I move on to the next thing. Right. Right? You see what it is? So the people that learn determination somewhere along the way, they ultimately are better. Over time.
Because they like you said, they're working so hard.
They earn it.
Right. They're working so hard to get to that point that when they grasp it, it's very, unlike someone who just kind of has it already and doesn't have to work. Yeah, we see that everywhere.
There's a lot of determined people. There's a lot of people where things come easy to them because they're very intelligent. There are very few determined, hyper intelligent people. They tend to be the exceptional people.
Right. Yeah, so, the Michael Jordans.
If you have one side, you have to learn the other. If you see, so and that's what greatness is. Greatness is high levels of both. Being good is just having a high level of one.
Right.
So I'm very
Well,
determined. So you can see how that balancing is. But those
yep,
are exceptional human beings. Those exceptional human beings almost look supernatural to regular people
right.
because they don't understand that little equation we just talked about.
Let me ask you a question, Paul. And how much time we have? I don't want to keep you for that much longer if you got to be doing simulation racing here.
It's
We're
almost tea time. I am English, and we usually have
oh,
tea at 4 o'clock. So.
oh. Okay. So we have we've
No, I'm
been
just
here.
kidding. It's 4
Well, you
minutes to 4, Colorado.
right. You've been you were born in England, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then you came here pretty early.
Yes. In 1973, so I was 8 years old when
Oh,
we came
wow.
to the U.S.
Okay, cool. Let me see 1 second. Just make sure that where are we? Because I made the screen a little bit bigger. I just want to make sure it should still be. Hold on, where are we? Yeah, it should be. I think it's still recording. It looks like it should be still recording. So what I was going to ask you was this: how much time? 15 minutes, 20 minutes? Just so I.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome. So, so what do you think about guys that go out there and are using the opposite of what we just talked about, the polar opposite? They're basically using the money to just get out there, do a couple laps, and then what they usually do, I've seen a lot of this in here in Miami, and I personally had what I could call, not anymore, but I did call him a friend at one point. A gentleman who basically goes out there with his LMP2 Corvette. It's a 2005, 2006 LS2. It's basically an LMP2 prototype race car. And he goes out there and he does a couple laps in the car. And then obviously he brings in a professional race car driver to do the real timing and the real fast laps in the car. And then just to get up on the podium. What would you say to people that do that? How would you regard
Good for them. Good for them. I've got no problem with people. First of all, like from a very practical perspective, they're the guys that are pretty much paying for motorsports for the rest of us.
Okay.
So I like being the pro guy with him, right? Because I get to drive that car I couldn't afford to drive in certain situations. So, and for him, from his perspective, it's fantasy fulfillment, and he has a chance to kind of fulfill a fantasy because he worked hard enough in some industry to earn enough money to be able to afford that car and go out and race it.
Right.
I pat him on the back and I applaud him, and I wish I had the business skills to be like him.
Well, he's a trust fund baby, so I think he's the.
That's fine too. If it turns out that this person is a terrible person, then he's a terrible person.
Right.
And that's a completely separate topic.
Right.
But someone spending money to go racing because they can afford to do it, thank you. Yeah, go do it. Again, there's a negative to that if he decides to go into race in real professional motorsports, he is now buying a seat that maybe I could get for free or I could get paid to do. But that's the plus and the minus of it. And those guys pump a lot of money into racing, and it's just part of the deal.
It's kind of like a necessary evil.
Who am I to judge them? Right. I would definitely take it on a one-on-one level. I've met plenty of those guys that I think are not necessarily good people, and I've met plenty of them that I think are amazing people, and I love hanging out with them. And the money is not the factor; it's just whether they're good people or not, right? Right. So they're good people that are rich, and they're bad people that are rich. They're good people that are poor, and they're bad people that are poor. Right. That's the criteria, not the money.
Right. Yeah, there's all types of. I mean, we're 7 billion of us here. I mean, there's a huge spectrum.
across the board. That's it. And everyone deserves a fair shake. And whether they're financially well off or not,
right?
Good for them. Wish I was.
So I met one of them. Okay, I'll tell you a funny story. I met one which was really funny. I'm at the paddock. I was there with a good friend of mine that had a small racing team, and I'm just walking around and I see this 993. It was a 993. So it was a 96, 97, 993. It wasn't the Cup car. It was the Evo. Hold on, I gotta catch myself on this one. Evo, super rare. Oh no, excuse me. I'm sorry. It was a 993 RSR Cup race car, which was.
Yep.
Those are pretty fucking rare. Oh
They're
yeah.
super rare, and they're worth crazy money right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're up there in the, I think they're 1+ now. I think
Yes,
because
they are.
this was, yeah, they're up there. And
Yep.
that car to me was like, I mean, it was like looking at, I mean, I'm not going to obviously even come close to any of the Can-Am cars, but it really was a super rare race car. I mean, that was just like, holy shit, I can't believe it. In the same paddock, he had a brand new 599 GTO when they had just come out, a Mazda 6 world champion car. And what else did he have? He had and a Porsche Turbo. That was like his daily that he came in with. And this guy, my friend, was out there racing E36s, a 325 or a 328 with barely 300 horsepower, 260 horsepower. And he was running circles around this guy. So when the guy pulled in with the 993, I had to ask him. I had to go up to him and ask him, hey, man, something going on with the cars? No, man, what are you talking about? I thought I did a fantastic lap. And I'm like, what? Like, my friend with his 325 was like 3 spaces in front of you. That car has barely 300 horsepower. And he kind of was like, well, I guess he's faster than me. And I just was like, oh my God. So I turned around.
As long as he was cool about it, like, again.
Oh no, he wasn't a dick, but
Yeah.
I was in shock that this person, right, who had obviously the money to buy the car, was not being too competitive, obviously not even coming close to the limit or anything like that.
It's just out having a good time, man.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that.
Right. So I talked to my friend and I asked, I just wanted to know, I was really interested in knowing who the guy is. He says, oh, that guy? Yeah, he's a billionaire. I said, oh, okay, what does he do? He said, well, the ketchup bags that we all have learned to use at McDonald's and Burger King and every fast food.
Little packets.
The little packets. So he supposedly came up with a patent he invented the stamping machine.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
God, I love stories like that.
Isn't that crazy?
I could have come up with that. Why?
I know. Like, why couldn't we come up with it, And I was like, shit, man. So it was a crazy thing to see some, and you see a lot of that here in Miami. You do see a lot of it.
There's a ton of those guys. Like I said, if they get out of the car and they're like, I'm the world's fastest driver, and who do you think you are talking? They got attitude. That's just a bad person. It has nothing to do with it's a bad rich person,
right?
Or a bad poor person, or a bad average person, right? You know what I mean? So it's like that's the criteria that I want to judge anyone on. Again, not that I should be judging them, just whether I want to like them or hang out with them or not. Right. Is if he's having a good time, a guy like that, I would try and befriend, and I would say, I can coach you, and I've had these conversations with the guy, and the guy's like, I'm good. I'm like, awesome. And if the guy's not a menace on the track, in other words, he's not getting people's way, and he's not blocking people, and he doesn't have an attitude when anyone fast comes up behind him. If he's just out having a good time, just fantastic.
Yeah.
And for him, it's just an experience. More gentlemen drivers are there just to be a part of the experience and be in the paddock and smell the race fuel and wear a race suit and have a helmet and just go through the motions. And they're not that interested in being a world-class driver themselves. Right. And to me, I do try and turn them. I'm like, I could make you great.
Yeah.
And I try and set that hook in them. And I found guys that are like, really? Because I've had coaches, they've never made any progress in me. I'm like, try. I have a different methodology. Yeah, and let's go do it. But I have other guys. I have plenty of guys that say I'm good, and I'm like, okay. Again, if they're being a menace, I'll be a bit more forceful and say I'd at least like to get you to or even the track day people or the sanctioning body would be like, maybe you shouldn't even be out there the way you're driving, because you are being a bit of a danger to other people.
Right.
But if they're not being a danger and they're just out enjoying themselves, then that's on them, And remember, the sport means different things to different people. And one of the things that I've used to describe this before is I say that there's car enthusiasts and then there's driving enthusiasts.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was something I was going to bring up as well. Yeah.
Yeah, you can be both, and I'm certainly both. I love cars, but I have a lot of very good racing friends that hate cars. They're like not into cars at all. They're just racing drivers. That's their job.
Really?
It's like it's a job, yeah. And to me, I'm like, wow. But
that seems alien to me. I can't even think of how that would work.
I could name them, but I wouldn't. But yeah, I know several of them. And then there's a great percentage of the population that are just car enthusiasts, and they're people that like double clutch gearboxes because they're like, oh, it's just faster, so I don't have to learn to shift faster. I don't have to learn how to heel and toe downshift, or I don't have to learn how to double the clutch downshift. So this is technology that makes driving easier for me. Or I even like autopilot on a Tesla, kind of thing, right? So, but they can love cars. Like you look at like Tesla fanboys or the Tesla community, it's full of very passionate car enthusiasts for that brand. But you and I have, and I'm assuming this about you, but I'm saying we don't align very much with their values of what makes. But they're still. But you see what I'm saying? They're still passionate.
It's a different level, right? It's a different level, right?
And to them, the ultimate luxury is to have their car drive them down the road. And somewhere in the middle are people that are car enthusiasts that, like I said, like owning a Porsche GT3 and like having it with a dual clutch gearbox because it makes it easier for them because they never had to learn how to heel and toe downshift, right? Or shift or drive a manual car correctly. So there's all these different levels to it. But then when you come at it from the driving enthusiast level, they're like, well, I don't want a car to shift for me. I want to have to earn that. I want to shift it smoothly and well myself. So those are more driving enthusiasts. You realize that they're all part of the automotive spectrum. They'll all probably listen to this podcast and my other podcasts, that I do or whatever I write and read my book and whatever it is. And they're all automotive enthusiasts, and that's great because they all pump money into this hobby, and without them, our hobby wouldn't be what it is, or I wouldn't be able to make. It's not a hobby for me; it's a living.
Yeah, it's a living.
I wouldn't be able to have this living doing what most people would call a hobby.
Right.
So.
Well, I think that was always that's always to me that whole hobby that's always such a. I remember in high school there was this girl. I was always talking cars, and this girl comes up to me. She goes, "Oh, you'll get over. That's just a phase." And I said, "What?" I just looked at her with this crazy face, like,
does it to me.
How dare you even say that? And then I looked at her, and this girl was crazy about Britney Spears, right? So I just shot it right back at her. I said, "Let me ask you something. If Britney Spears walked in right now, and I told you, oh, get over it. That's Britney Spears. Who gives a shit?" And then she's like, "What do you?" And then she got it. She understood, like, oh, okay. So some people don't understand that. Hey, this isn't just a hobby. This is a passion. It's.
Yeah.
We've been driven from day one in our lives. I mean, for me, it definitely comes from the family tree because my grandfather used to race motorcycles. My grandma, who was, let me tell you, man, you want just because we kind of covered World War II. My grandma was from Hungary. My great grandmother was in a concentration camp, and she fought for her life to get my grandmother out. So it's no joke, and she was a huge, that was crazy stuff. That's a whole other conversation. But
you think you've got people that are like stamp collectors that are incredibly passionate about that, or bird watchers. You see what I'm saying? It's like it runs the gamut. And to me, I'm perfectly happy to my point of being like so tolerant. People would say, "Wow, you're really tolerant of people at the racetrack." I just try and be tolerant of people generally. I'm happy when any human being has some passion in their life
about something.
I'm like, because I'm really big, and I even delve into the realm of motivational speaking, as you could probably tell with some of the stuff that I've talked about here. But but really, our lives are a search to just be meaningful.
Right. That's right.
And so one of the big problems that people have is they lack a purpose. Our society isn't doing a very good job educating people and giving them purpose, because that's where it comes from. And parenting as well. Like everyone wants to complain about millennials today, but who's responsible for them? Their parents, the baby boomers.
Right, baby boomers.
They're responsible. You don't like millennials? You bred them and you raised them like that.
Right.
It's your fault. And by the way, I'm part of that generation. I have 2 kids, and I tried to raise them to have some real values and to have some meaning, to have some purpose, and to realize that they need to contribute to society in some way. They need to be meaningful as a human being for their lives to matter. And so in that, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's stamp collecting. Be a meaningful stamp collector. Right. Be a meaningful anything. Find some purpose. It's not just passion, it's purpose, right? And then become great at it. And the same process that I used in all this training, that I've learned this process to find that last second to take people into the realms of diminishing return, to find the greatness within all of us, that can be applied to anything.
Right. Yeah, not just
Anything.
anything as a car.
Anything.
Everything. Yeah.
It's a process for being meaningful.
Right.
I have chosen to try and be meaningful in the genre, in the area of motorsports,
Automotive.
in the automotive spectrum, right? That's what I'm excited about. But you see me on a pair of skis, you see me on a mountain bike, you see me riding a motorcycle.
Kicking ass.
I do all the same way. I don't do them the same level.
Right.
I don't do them the same level. For the simple reason that I've dedicated my life to the cars.
Right.
Right. So that's the one that I've spent the time in the pool, to use the Michael Phelps analogy.
Right.
My time in the pool has been spent in automotive, in vehicles, in driving. So that's the thing that I'm better at, but I apply the process to everything.
Right. Well, Paul, let me tell you, you're a fantastic, amazing human being, man. This has been like amazing. I don't want to hold you up. It's been, I think, more than 20 minutes, and I really don't want to hold you up. I could keep on listening to you for a long time, talk to you for a couple more hours, but I know you got to get going on that Pikes Peak simulation. But so I have one question, and that is, how do we, first of all, well, I don't want to ask this directly like that, but I'm a pretty direct person. I don't want to bullshit. So how can we, well, first thing I'm going to do is, like I promised you, I'm going to go ahead and make that phone call today to the owner of the 917. I sent you the email, by the way, so you have the PDF with all the racing history. I kind of wanted to cover it, man, but since we got into all different types of everything, I didn't want to, I didn't want to stop you at all. I think this podcast is going to be amazing. Is amazing already at this point.
Thank you.
So what we'll do is, so how can I, well, how do you, when you go instruct someone, or when you start from ground zero, like you said, what would be the process of, let's say, if I was interested right now in wanting to do something with you as far as driving?
So
racing?
to get a hold of me, my book's name is Optimum Drive. So just remember the Optimum Drive.
The Optimum Drive.
The Optimum Drive. So if you go to theoptimumdrive.com, that is my website.
Okay.
On theoptimumdrive.com, there's an email that you can click on. But I'll give you the email. It is theoptimumdrive@gmail.com.
Okay. Perfect.
If you want to go to Facebook or to Instagram, The Optimum Drive will get you to my pages. So the Optimum Drive is the key to everything. And then also, if you want to take a look at the book, it's just Optimum Drive, and just Google it. It'll pop up. It'll pop up. Most people just get it from Amazon. It is available digital. It's available as an ebook, and of course the soft cover, the actual physical book, which is truly the one I recommend because it's the latest version of it. It's been through three or four different printings right now. So I keep kind of doing edits and refining it as I go.
Okay, cool. And so if anybody, like, again, for example, like me personally, if I wanted to try to get tutored by you and start from ground zero, what would be it would just be through those means to just contact you and say, hey.
I would tell you to read my book.
Okay.
Seriously, because my book explains my methodology. I know it sounds like I'm plugging it, but that's my honest answer to that question. Is I tell people, I used to say, well, let's just have this really, really long conversation, sort of like this podcast.
Right.
But really, if you just read the book, you'll know me and how I think and this process that I've talked about, and then you'll know whether you want to be coached by me. Okay. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
And I found that the book is this amazing business card for me.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like that's how I use. I'm like because I could try and describe myself in trying to be humble and describe yourself. It's very difficult and awkward to do. Read my book, seriously. Okay. And it's like if you like it, email me and we'll take it from there. And by the way, I've had that happen to me from people around the world, and it's awesome. I love it. It's super humbling to have someone from New Zealand that I've never met before going, hey, will you coach me? I just read your book and it's awesome. Yeah. And I love that stuff.
That's a good feeling. That's got to be an amazing feeling.
It's amazing. I never thought it's the first book I ever wrote. So I hadn't been able to consider sort of the positive side of what would happen on the backside of releasing the book. Right. And it's been a really cool journey. And I'm, again, super humble and super appreciative of people that are just willing to kind of listen to me rattle on
Right.
About
You
what
don't
I
rattle. There's
what
no
I think
rattling.
is really important. What I think is really important.
I listen. Listen. There's absolutely no rattling. Everything that's come out of your mouth today, man, has been. Again, the reason I wanted to do this podcast is to spread the information, not just information. It's just not just talking. It's very valuable, things that could be used for younger people, for people that are in their 30s or 40s, whatever, that could be used as a value for their foundation system to try to listen to something like this and go, hey, you can do this if you want to, but you have to be extremely determined. That's number one. So I think that's one of the main points of this entire podcast is determination is number one if you want to do anything to be the greatest. And I think that goes for it.
That's it. Yep. And just keep it real, man. If you keep it real and don't
bullshit
listen
yourself.
to the lies. Yeah, the lies we tell ourselves on a daily basis. And that's the thing. And sometimes we're so far down that path, it takes us a long time to even realize that we are telling ourselves a story. So it takes kind of that smack in the back of the head. I always joke that my wife has to whack me in the back of the head at least 3-4 times a day because I just say or think stupid things, right? And she can read my thoughts. I'm convinced of it. So we all need to be centered and put our ship back on course pretty regularly. And what you find is most people never really have course corrections, and so they end up a long way from their own reality, wondering what the heck happened and why, they never reached any of the dreams or goals that they wanted to reach when they were younger. And you realize that it's every single thing is in your head, and it is rewirable, reprogrammable. They talk about neuroplasticity and how you can rewire your brain. You can think differently.
Oh, yeah.
Again, it all goes back to that word determination, and then just being rational and logical, doing your research, make those little incremental changes. That journey of 1,000 miles just starts with one single step.
Right.
And and you just want to make sure you're heading in the right direction, and that's where that reality kind of, you keep yourself on course and you just methodically work your way there. And if you're super smart, good for you. It's not going to take long. But if you're not, like me, don't worry. You can still do it. It's just going to take you longer, and you're going to end up more determined than the spark guy, and you're going to beat him in the end. And that's going to make you feel good.
I think that by itself is super motivational. The fact that someone that might not have the gift, but can still manage to somehow, some way try to, get to that point. And
creation is a sheer force of will. I can't remember who the quote is credited to, but it's creation is a sheer force of will. If you want to create greatness in yourself, you're just going to have to be, you're going to have to dedicate your life to it, and it's possible.
Right. Yeah, that's right. All right, Paul. Well, let's do this. So we'll end it here. Awesome podcast. And what we'll do is I'm going to try to contact the owner. Let me see if I can get something done. You said that you're going to be pretty much okay until the 13th, right? 13th, 14th is when you head out to Pikes Peak.
Yeah. And I'm here or there available, in June and so on and so forth. And I have a somewhat flexible schedule because I kind of make my own schedule. So as long as I have some lead time, I can usually make all sorts of things happen.
Okay, that sounds awesome. You have no idea how much I appreciate that. I still have so many things I wanted to talk about, but everything we talked about was amazing. I just, if you want, it's up to you. If you want to do another one whenever you're, free again, and obviously not a really super long one, but just certain things that I wanted to talk to, stuff that has to do with the automotive industry and where manufacturers are going right now, and the hypercars and supercars. We didn't get into all that just because, this was like the foundation of the start. But you have no idea, man, how much I grew up watching. You were on Top Gear 4, just because I wanted to get the exact years. You were on Top Gear from 2007?
2000, what was it? 2008 to 2016. Okay. 2008 to 2016.
Okay. So imagine, man. Yeah. And before you was
I still do stuff with them as well. So I just don't do that particular role. But yeah, I still drive for them, and I drive for the Grand Tour.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm still, pretty.
Well, I hate to say this, but I have not watched. And this is going to sound really bad, me coming from being a diehard car guy, but I have not.
The guy who has watched Formula One in nine years.
Hey, man.
So this all makes sense.
You see? Yeah, there you go. So I have not watched the Grand Tour, and to tell you the truth, I can't give you a good reason why. It's just I was going to for the first one, and I don't have Netflix. I don't do the Netflix thing, so that was a big portion of it. I don't even have Netflix, so I think that played a portion in it.
It's on Amazon, so you're all set.
It's on Amazon. Okay, there we go. Because I used to love the old ones so much that I would actually sometimes replay the older versions, just the older episodes, like where you were the stake and all.
They're awesome.
Yeah, those were amazing. Like the big race ones, those were one of my favorite. I mean, watching the show was great, but the big challenges, those were some of my favorite, my favorite episodes that were ever done. So, but
cool.
All right, man. So we'll keep in touch. I'll send you. Well, you got the PDF, and I'll Oh, you know what I'll do? I'll send you a video just so you could check out the car. It's just a proof of life video they had sent me.
Cool.
And the second I know from him what we could do with it, I'll let you know.
Yeah, whatever. It'd just be cool. It's just a cool thing, and then just let me know when the podcast airs and where, so I can share it too.
For sure. Yeah, I'm gonna link it up right now, and I'll send you the link. It'll be a simple link that you could just share with anybody that you want. And
cool.
And then what I really want to do is somehow I'm going to talk to my friend Adrian, the engineer. You got to have a conversation with him because you're going to feel, I think having a conversation with me was a little bit of, a foundation, but with him, man, he could really get into a lot of the mechanical engineering portions of a lot of stuff.
Let's do that. Let's do that next time then with the three of us.
Okay, that'll be awesome. That would be great. Yeah, because he would love to talk to you. And again, it's going to be a super honor. So, and it has been an honor, man. I have no idea. I know I can't. I know that you're like, stop it. But listen, man, you have no idea. You know what it is? Think of someone you used to watch. I mean, imagine if you had the chance to meet. I mean, I'm not saying that you're not, but you're kind of like,
I'm not.
Kind of like, no, I'm going to say like it's kind of like meeting, it's almost like meeting Ayrton Senna. It's not because you're not, but it's kind of like that. I'm telling you, for me, this is like fucking major. Like when people are going to listen to this, I told a friend of mine, when I told Adrian, he's like, what? You talked to, and I'm like, yeah, he said he's going to do a podcast. He's like, no, that's impossible. What are you talking about? He didn't want to leave me. So I said, listen, I'm going to do it. I'll send you the link, listen to it. Then you can fucking shit your pants.
I'm just a normal guy.
Yeah. Well, normal guy that did some pretty amazing things with his life, man. So we'll end it on that. All right, Paul, I really appreciate it again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, man. Have a good time.
All right. Take care.
Later,
You
man.
too. Bye.